as well as Mr. Marlaska, and of course, the European institutions, which have completely failed in what's supposed to be the European Union's external border.
Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
Well, Morocco, of course, is hosting the next World Cup. I mean, are we
invading the country? And what that is weak law, bad management, but very liberal law. They passed a couple of laws, and people read. You know, people are smart. They read from other countries, and they swam that 3-mile sweat wall, however they got in, but nobody's seen anything like it. That will look good compared to what's going to happen to the United States. The biggest thing, the worst thing that Biden did is allowing 25 million people into our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. It is the ever-growing Talk Breakfast. It's Collins in for Kyle. Thursday, the 6th of August. So much to get through. As I was just saying before the news there, what does redemption and forgiveness look like? This is the story, and it's fascinating. Former neo-Nazi, and this man's rap sheet was flipping grim, I can tell you, culminating at the Old Bailey and a prison sentence for his endeavours into extremism. But he was selected as a Conservative Party candidate for a local council, given the green light by Kemi Badenoch. However, he's now stood down. The pressure was too much. The question is this: should he ever have been selected in the first place? Or do you take that view that redemption and someone's grim and, in this case, anti-Semitic past, does it actually make you more informed, so long as you've genuinely turned the corner? We'll look at that as well. In a similar kind of way, talking to people walking the plank, the curious story. This is like a flipping soap opera, this one. Professor Jason Arday. He's now resigned from Cambridge University after it was revealed he falsely claimed to have published a book. That's a big old claim, isn't it, if you didn't do it? He was also being investigated following new information about his qualifications and honorary appointments. It's not looking good. Many arguing this man was appointed solely because of his DEI tick box credentials. Thoughts on that? Elsewhere, the petition to stop the killers of PC Andrew Harper being released is now approaching 500,000. Details on that with Peter Bleksley to come. The Met police officer who shot Chris Kaba will not face misconduct proceedings. The Independent for Police Conduct has said this is a victory for common sense. It's a victory for policing. Couple of lighter ones here. I don't know which one to go with on this, but I'll give you both of them. Brits, trying to avoid the perils of the heat wave, are taking drastic action by sleeping in the kitchen. Millions of us are apparently trapped in homes that simply won't cool down. Who sleeps in the kitchen? Where do you sleep in the kitchen? And what about this for a banger? 25 years ago today, they stopped producing the Reliant Robin. At what point did somebody go into a car showroom and say, yeah, I want that one, please? Give me the car with one less wheel. A quarter of a century ago, they said, we can't take it anymore, and they ditched it. But those who had one, I'm told, absolutely loved it. Of course, made famous by Only Fools and Horses and the like. They really loved it. Here's a question. What was better 25 years ago? Christian, our producer, said the lack of choice. And I'm kind of with him on that. The lack of choice. Choice is meant to be the thing that opens up the world in so many areas, whether it's shopping in the supermarket, restaurants, holidays, cars, credit agreements, you name it. Choice is everywhere. Lack of choice was actually a simpler life. What was better 25 years ago? You can message us on that one, 0344 499 1000. Peter Bleksley is with us.
Good morning,
Peter.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Did you ever drive a Reliant Robin?
No, I nearly bought one off a mush in Shepherd's Bush once upon a time.
A mush in the
but no.
bush?
But no, I didn't. No.
You don't hear that word very often, a mush. Still love that. It's all right, mush.
There you go.
Yeah. You nearly bought one. You nearly went for the Robin.
No, I was just stealing that line from the great song that opened up Only Fools and Horses.
Do you know what's interesting is as I said at the beginning, people who liked the Reliant Robin loved it. It was like, I don't know by what measure. As I said in the beginning there, you went to a garage and went, yeah, what about the one with one less wheel? I'll take that.
Yeah.
You had Ford Escorts, you had Capris,
Yeah.
Cortinas. Yeah, not big choice, as we were just saying.
You're taking me down memory lane. I owned both a Capri and a Cortina at some point in my life. Not together, obviously.
Is
Only
it cheaper with one less? Well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? Is it written on the invoice, wheel discount, like at the bottom?
But the
You've only got-
insurance must have been astronomical, wouldn't it? If you've only got 3 wheels on your car.
Well, you'd think so, but, you know, apparently they were completely... I mean, who invented that? Why did they invent it? What were they thinking?
Goodness only knows.
Some car engineer sat down to literally design a car missing a wheel.
But if you'd bought one 25 years ago, and if you'd painted it yellow, and if you'd had its sign written, like Trotter's Independent Traders,
Yeah.
I bet it would be worth a fortune now.
I think they probably... Are they in the classic car sort of...
I would
territory?
imagine so. And you could drive it to events, couldn't you? Everybody would love to see a car that mimicked Dellum Rodney's classic.
But it was
motor.
one of those things, you know, when you used to wait for the new number plate, as kids, when the new number plate came out, and you'd spot a car. Do you remember that, Mark? You'd spot a car that was a new plate. Always got a P plate. Ted over the road bought a Capri. I couldn't flipping believe it. It was unbelievable and brand new. I don't ever remember going, oh, look, there's a new Reliant Robin.
No, probably not. Of course, number plates only used to be issued once a year, didn't they? And then they made it twice a year, which I think kind of diluted the excitement somehow. But
If you're watching on screen, we've got the spread there in the that's in the Sun today. That one of the different the Express. I apologise. Rockin' Robin, they say, and there's a nice picture of it. I mean, it was a disgusting car, wasn't it? Really, there's no redeeming qualities in that thing.
none whatsoever. And the steering of it, I wonder whether it was ultra responsive because you only had one wheel at the front. And I'm not surprised they show a picture in the Express of one kind of on its side. Hardly surprising.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, here I am getting high and mighty about the lack of style and quality. During this era, my dad had a Hillman Hunter. Do you remember those things?
Yeah, I do.
So
We had them in the police. The inspectors used to drive Hillman Hunters.
Really?
Yeah, red. Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable. Mr. Bean had a Reliant Robin. I thought he had a Mini. Oh, he was haunted by a Reliant Robin, Mr. Bean was. The Hillman Hunter, my dad swore by this guy. It was a horrible car, and it was beige as well, I won.
This is not an audition for Top Gear, is it, you and me are having here? Because I think we'd fail, both of us.
Do you think we'd fail? Just banging on about old knackered cars. The Hillman Hunter. But what was better 25 years ago? For you,
Everything.
Peter? Everything.
We weren't all handcuffed to mobile phones,
Yeah.
slaved to the screen. Everything was better. Absolutely everything.
It was all rather simple, wasn't it? I was asked the other day by the accountant. So they've started this new Making Tax Digital thing, right? So it started. We're in the first quarter. Well, we've just gone through the first quarter, now in the second quarter of it. So you have to do your accounts every 3 months, whereas before you just had to do it once a year.
Yeah.
So this is throwing up a problem. I've got to my age of 32, and I've never once, it's not funny, Peter, taking offence at this end, I'm discombobulating. I've never, ever made a spreadsheet.
No, not
I've
me.
never had to do it.
Nor me.
Okay, so 25 years ago, you had like the shoebox with your receipts in it, and you went to the account, and the accountant said, "Oh, we've got to do it differently now, and you've got to sort of satisfy you've done it all. So you've got to make a spreadsheet." I said, "Of what?" They said, "Every single thing you've spent in 3 months has got to go on there." I said, "So, well, like, you know, transport, if I'm buying a train ticket, I'll just put all the collective amount for the, no, not the collective amount, each journey."
Yep.
Every journey you made.
Yeah.
There's like 500 entries on this spreadsheet.
I'm a self-employed freelancer.
Got it.
Okay, I
Same
don't
here.
work for anybody. I just work for whosoever wants me on that day or that week. So consequently, I am allowed to claim a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's all legitimate because, for example, if I'm travelling from this studio to another, and I purchase a coffee along the way, I am allowed to offset the cost of that coffee against my tax entitlement. It's perfectly legitimate. I'm away from my home. I don't have an office. It's not like I can carry a portable kettle with me. That's a perfectly legitimate claim.
Yes.
So you imagine being on the road as I am, virtually all day, every day, the amount of receipts that I gather and submit to my accountant. It is a stack of them. And that's why I pay the accountant, because he in turn pays somebody to go through all of those receipts and collectively add them up into one kind of figure. I gather all my income and that kind of stuff. So to do this every 3 months is an absolute very unfunny joke.
Yes.
Because it's going to hoover time away that I could otherwise have been spending earning money, possibly. Because when I did my accounts, I used to write off a day and a half for the year.
To sit down and do it.
To gather all my receipts together, to put my income schedule together, and to gather any other costs that might have been elsewhere. And that was fine. I accepted it. But this way, having to do it every 3 months is going to be more time consuming.
It's more time consuming. And then what I got dumped on me at the last minute was this spreadsheet thing. Because I had to, sort of evidence these. She said, "Oh, just get it to us by Wednesday." This was last Friday, I think. And I thought, really? My weekend's penciled out. I'm doing breakfast for the next couple. When am I? So I'm on the train yesterday doing a little bit of it. I mean, it's all go. I've just, in fact, as we've been talking, I've just claimed for a Kit Kat. So I'm doing it now. It's this is time-consuming stuff.
I know.
But the point is, 25 years ago, you didn't have spreadsheets in that. Well, you did have some, but you did. And I was always quite tech-savvy. But the spreadsheet, I tried 3 different ones. I went through all of them.
Never done one. My oldest boy lives his life. Him and his wife, soon-to-be, live their lives by spreadsheets. And, OK, it works for them.
Yeah.
They have to be very careful about every penny. They've got a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. So they are absolutely red hot on their finances, and everything goes into a spreadsheet, including all the costs of their upcoming marriage.
Yeah.
But, oh, my word, it really is. When I took a glimpse at one of them, it's like...
I mean, it's meant to make your life easier. This comes in from Roger, who says, Ian and Peter, Jeremy Clarkson managed to overturn a Reliant Robin on the old Top Gear.
There you go.
I bet that was a sight to see. John says, my granddad had a Reliant Kitten. Do you remember those?
No.
I've got a feeling my history teacher at secondary school had a Reliant Kitten.
Really?
Now, that was a deluxe model of the Reliant range. It had a 4th wheel, so technically it was better than a Robin. Or was it? That's right, it didn't have the 3 wheels, the kit.
Right. Okay.
Who made... I mean, was Reliant the manufacturer? Who made these, Christian? Who was behind it?
Well, one would imagine so.
Mike in South Wales says you could drive a Reliant Robin as a 17-year-old on a provisional licence without anyone in the car with you. Is that right?
Really? Because it was only 2-seater, right? I'm assuming.
Was it only 2 seats?
Did it have seats in the back? I don't know.
I can't remember either.
No.
The American Embassy in Grosvenor Square specifically bought a small custom batch of Reliant Robin hatch vans, hand-built at Tamworth factory between 97 and 98. They were painted in a distinct blue colour. Because of manufacturing technicalities, this rare batch of vans was officially registered under the Rialto model name. Only about 5 examples of these specific Embassy-era vans are known to survive today.
Why on earth would the Americans have wanted those? We need to hear more about this mystery. Left me hanging on a cliff edge here.
It's brilliant. I mean, the Americans love a big... when Americans used to come to the UK before we had bigger cars, the one thing they used to sort of giggle about was the size of our little cars.
Yeah.
Because they had these big Cadillacs and all manner of huge 4x4s way before we did. And they couldn't believe that people mooched around in a Ford Fiesta and things like that. So for the American Embassy, although it was a van version, as we've just heard there from David.
What did they use them for? It's a mystery which needs to be solved.
Absolutely right.
American Embassy, please get in touch.
They listen every day.
There you go.
0344 499 1000. Voice notice there as well. We've got 2 little light ones to be going on with there. What was better 25 years ago? Did you own a Reliant Robin? And the other one, we didn't really get into this, by the way. I'll light up. Brits are avoiding the perils of the heat wave, have taken to sleeping in the kitchen. Now, my kitchen's quite a warm room. I'd gain nothing, and I don't know where I could sleep on. There's a table and an island thing. I could sleep on that, but it's very uncomfortable.
I've done a lot of things in our kitchen, some of which are not broadcastable.
I'm sure.
But sleeping in it...
It's an interesting image.
It's not one of them.
Sleeping after is.
We've parted a lot in our kitchen over the years.
Why would the kitchen... There's a picture in The Sun of a woman in a chair with the fridge door open.
Now, that's a waste of electricity.
And also, a lot of fridges now, like mine, bleep if you leave the door open.
Yeah.
So it would be like an alarm clock going off all the time, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No, kitchens are definitely not places to sleep in.
How do you swerve the heat wave? We did talk about this a few months ago now, didn't we, Charlie Rowley, and it turned into a right old session of really interesting and imaginative ways to stay cool.
Well, we've got an old fan that lives in the loft all winter.
Yep.
And it comes downstairs and it's extremely helpful, especially when I put it into oscillation mode.
I love the oscillation.
In other words, it turns around.
Yeah.
And take the duvet out of the duvet cover and just sleep under the cover.
Just the cover?
Yeah, no duvet, just under the cover. And that works for us.
Yeah. The Life of Peter Bleksley, the full 60-minute version, is available on YouTube. It's going to be great. Let's just have a couple of words on some big stories here. Just briefly, to begin with, we'll come into it, I'm sure, more a little later. The petition to stop the killers of PC Andrew Harper being released. You're a former cop, many years' experience, very senior level, Peter. I know the policing world feel very strongly about this. Thames Valley Federation, yesterday we had them on the show talking about taking the government to court if these people are released.
Just a footnote there, I chose specialisation rather than promotion, so I was a highly specialised detective, but not a very highly promoted one. OK, I checked this petition. It's at change.org if you want to sign up to it. Just before we came on air, 423,000 people have signed it. Yesterday morning, when I checked it, it was 170,000.
Wow.
So it's really gaining a lot of traction. And just about everybody I speak to, so not from the policing world, these are people, feel very, very strongly about this, incredibly strongly about it, because, of course, we all know that policing is far from perfect these days, and basically you've got the police chiefs of the last couple of decades to blame for the vast majority of that. However, people still want to be able to trust those frontline police officers, and they are the officers on the front line that run towards danger.
Correct.
When we, of course, would be encouraged and told to run and hide.
Yeah.
Look at the front page of The Sun today. 2 officers pinning down a woman who allegedly had stabbed a number of people. They're the officers to go and deal with this kind of stuff. They are courageous. And there was none more dedicated to public service and none more heroic in the history of policing than PC Andrew Harper. And please allow me just a minute to remind everybody of what he was doing. PC Harper had returned to his base at about 11 p.m. at the end of his shift. He was taking off his kit. You know, the belts you see them carrying, with handcuffs and a baton and possibly a taser and spray and the such like, and getting out of his uniform, getting ready to go home, because on the following day he was going on annual leave. He was starting his honeymoon. And he heard a call come in about a crime in progress. So, with no thoughts of his suitcase whatsoever, he attended that call and paid for it with his life. That's the level of dedication he had to protecting the public. And the thought that these 2 verminous pieces of trash are going to qualify for any form of early release, from a sentence, by the way, which was pathetically lenient, absolutely disgracefully lenient, 13 years for the life of another, for the life of a police officer doing his duty, is scandalous. This figure on this petition is, of course, going to climb yet again today, and it's a fine example of how strongly the public feel about this.
Absolutely right. His death was absolutely horrific. It was, you know, the details of which we couldn't really go into in its entirety at a time like this. It would seem extraordinary to me that these people are now going to get released. Surely not.
Yeah, and I confidently predict, and they are very welcome to sue me should they wish to, these two creatures. I confidently predict, going by their behaviour during the trial, when they were utterly disrespectful of the court process, of the legal process, of the Old Bailey itself. They were sneering, they were smiling, they were laughing. They heaped hurt and pain onto the family as they had to witness their disgusting behaviour. I confidently predict that they will not return to society rehabilitated, reformed, willing to knuckle down, get a job, pay their taxes, contribute to society. And if bookmakers offered odds on such things, I'm not a gambling man, but I would safely invest a few quid saying that they will be back inside a prison, perhaps sooner rather than later.
It certainly feels like that. On a related matter of policing, this was, well, I'd say a good news story. For the officer concerned to be taken through this process was horrific. And this is the Met officer who shot Chris Kaba, will not face misconduct proceedings. This is the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct. This is a victory for common sense and policing.
Officer NX121 of these stories here, because in all probability, if NX121 had not pulled the trigger and shot Chris Kaba dead, we would probably be talking today about the death of Officer NX121. Fair. Kaba was a reckless, dangerous, violent, repugnant criminal. And he had a litany of convictions, including beating up his pregnant girlfriend. He was subject to a restraining order at the time he died. Just 2 nights beforehand, Kaba had shot a man in both legs in a packed, crowded nightclub. Kaba was beyond dangerous. If Kaba had not been shot, that very powerful vehicle that he was driving, that weighed in the region of 2 tons, would have collided with NX121 and probably ended his life. So the conclusion that I draw from both these stories, well, number one, NX121 was persecuted, not prosecuted. He did absolutely nothing wrong. He should never have stood trial for murder at the Old Bailey, as the jury very swiftly showed. And by the way, the jury wrote a letter to the judge that they wanted reading out in court. And do you know what? The judge wouldn't allow that letter to be read out.
Yeah, I thought that was
interesting. It was absolutely scandalous. I've seen that letter, and the jury made their feelings absolutely clear in that NX121 should never have been in the dock on a charge of murder, nor should he have been investigated by the IOPC, an organisation unfit for purpose. I'm not saying he shouldn't have been investigated. Of course, the events should have been investigated, but the conclusion should have been reached then. No trial, no charges, no misconduct. Should have been done back then.
Absolutely.
Not 4 years of torture. He was persecuted and not prosecuted. And I'm sorry I've gone on, but I'll just say this by way of my last words on here. The world is a better place because Chris Kaba is not in it. The world is a worse place because PC Andrew Harper is not in it.
Absolutely spot-on stuff from Peter Bleksley. More where that came from in a couple of moments. Some loads of comment from you on everything as serious as this. And on a lighter shade, the Reliant Robin seems to have taken an early doors lead in what's piqued the UK's interest this morning. We'll come on to more of those comments in a couple of moments. 26 minutes after 6. This is Talk Breakfast. Do Reform, however, have a plan to build more prisons?
Yeah, 100%. So we will have overseas prisons. We will deport all foreign prisoners to their point of origin. You know, like Labour has done with some, by the way. Do you remember one of them one of an illegal migrant from Ethiopia, they sent him back straight away.
Yeah.
You know, there was no returns agreement, or they had no problem with that.
Why can't that just happen?
Why can't that just happen now? So that's one thing we do. So we should free up about 12,000 spaces just doing that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
29 minutes after 6 o'clock. Good morning. Yeah, welcome. It's Collins in for Kyle on Talk Breakfast for this week and next. Lots to get through. The Reliant Robin. How did the Reliant Robin darken our doorstep this morning? Let's get a voice note on this very thing from Sally. Morning, Sally.
Good morning, Ian and Peter. Regarding the Reliant Robin, you could drive them on a motorbike licence. You didn't need a full car licence, but I suppose you felt as though you were in the car.
Yes, so that seems to be the story. A few people. Thank you, Sally, for that. Joe says my mum had a Robin Reliant. She only had to pay motorbike road tax, so it was cheaper. We went on holiday from Manchester to Wales in it. The suspension did not cope well over cattle grids.
Now, you see, there's this whole three-wheel thing going on, isn't there?
Yeah.
There are dispensations. For example, if you ride one of those motorbike-looking things that has three wheels, I tend to see them occasionally now.
Yeah, you see those.
They're a bit of like an easy rider thing, aren't they?
That's right.
You know, you see the geezer rocking back in his chair. He's got a leather jacket, black helmet, and he's holding it, big kind of like stand-up.
Suspicious moustache.
Handlebars, yeah. And they've got three wheels. Now, personally, I think it's not a great look. If you're gonna carry that look off, you need to have two wheels.
Two wheels
on your vehicle. It needs to be a motorbike, not a tricycle or a motorised trike, whatever you'd call it. But I think if you've got three wheels, and no doubt your audience might correct me, I'm not an expert in traffic law, I think if you've got three wheels, you might not have to wear a helmet. You might look a bit of a helmet, but you might not have to wear one.
I think you might be right about that.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people picking up on this. No name given on this one. I used to own a Reliant Robin. The one that they had on Only Fools and Horses was a Reliant Regal, and it was classed as a motor tricycle.
Wow.
So was that the only reason? Nobody picked a Reliant Robin for the aesthetics, did they? Nobody went along. As I said, you didn't go to a garage and go, wow, look, there's a Capri over there. There's a Mark III Cortina, Mark III... Do you remember the Mark III Escort? That was tasty when it came out. That went to the squarer look, didn't it?
The same as the Mark IV Cortina did. And
Mark
they
IV
almost
Cortina
tried to ape the look of a Merc, didn't they?
They did.
When they went to the Mark IV.
Mark IV Cortina was amazing. When I worked at Iceland when I was at school, the manager had a Mark IV Cortina with a vinyl roof. Yeah, it was a fine bit of kit, Peter.
There you go.
That was some of you, that was.
See, I yearn for that. 23 years ago, there was a lot more full Cortinas around, you see.
Absolutely.
And Capris.
But nobody would... My point is, nobody would have selected the Reliant Robin based on aesthetics, because it was... I think it was a bit of a joke even then. It wasn't like it had a heyday where people went, oh, I love a Reliant Robin. Nobody ever said that sentence.
I think people probably only ever laid their hands on a Reliant Robin because of cost. It must have been cost.
That. And the driving licence thing.
Yeah.
Ray says, my uncle drove a Reliant Robin, took me fishing all over South London and Surrey. They were loaded with weights for balance, and you could drive them legally on a motorbike licence. Same thing, Ray, thank you.
Oh, Ray's got me yearning to go fishing now.
You don't want to be meddling with that.
Oh, I love the days fishing by the lakes.
Do you?
Oh, I am. Coarse fishing by a lake, yeah. Scale it down, small kit, catching small fish. Love it.
Gary says, it's all about the small fishes. It says a policing analogy there. Wow. Get the small fish.
Well, I'd rather catch a big fish with as we used to say, we'd rather catch a big dealer with a small amount than a small dealer with a big amount.
Yeah. Gary says, the first ever production motor car built by German Carl Benz of Mercedes-Benz fame only had 3 wheels, apparently because at the time nobody had worked out how to make both the front wheels move in the same direction at the same time.
There you go. Every day's a school day.
Every day's a school day. And this from Julian in Beverley. Forget Formula One and the RAC Rally. I've always thought the only way to prove the best driver is to make them race bog-standard, identical Reliant Robins. That'll sort the men from the boys. I'd love to see the world's top drivers battle it out on a Monaco-style track around Peckham on a frosty Boxing Day morning. Great, I love the specifics of Boxing Day.
Yeah, and I like the thought of tarmacking over a bit of Peckham Rye, you know, at the north of the High Street or whatever. You get a small circuit in there and have people
I like the idea of tarmacking over all of Peckham Rye.
But what a great thought that drivers all had to drive exactly the same vehicle. Because as far, and I'm no motorsport expert, but from what I see of Formula One, it tends to be the driver that's got the best car that wins,
yes,
not necessarily the best driver, as I see it.
Well, I would have thought that would be, you know, that's kind of, to me, if you've got the best car, as long as you know what you're doing in it, you're going to win, aren't you?
I would imagine so.
More or less.
If you're a driver of a particular level. I mean, you could put me in the best Formula One car ever manufactured by mankind, and I would not win a race because I'm a pretty poor driver.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think those things take it. You could lose half a stone doing a circuit at Silverstone.
Don't tell my wife that. She'll have me up there in a flash.
I wonder what you were going to say then. What does redemption... Here's a slightly different... Well, a very different subject from Reliant Robins. The guy that was selected as a Tory candidate at a local election... transpired he was a former neo-Nazi. Now, this fella wasn't just dabbling with a bit of literature in his bedroom. He ended up at the Old Bailey, got himself, I think, 3 years. I mean, you know, he took extremism very seriously. It wasn't a pretty picture, but while he was in jail, he turned a corner. He went on all the relevant courses that are available to you. He turned it around. He realised the stupidity and the horror and offence of his previous views and positions. He could trace it back to his own, you know, background and vulnerabilities, and decided, I tell you what, I don't know why I was involved in all of this. I'm going to turn it around, become a very different person. In fact, I can even teach people about the dangers of extremism and difficulties. And Kemi Badenoch gave this guy the green light and said, it's fine. You know, in fact, I think she still wants him as an advisor, potentially. And, of course, all hell broke loose. He's now stood down and won't be standing as a candidate. But the question is, should someone like this ever be selected? Or is there something about redemption and having previously been a grim anti-Semitic horror show of a person, if you've turned that around, some would say, a bit like hackers, you know, why do Microsoft and Apple and people like that employ, you know, teenagers that previously were trying to destroy large corporations?
On very good wages,
On very good wages, because they know, you know, they know their way around it.
Yeah.
So is this guy a kind of shining example, in a curious way, of turning your life around from what you previously thought?
Yeah, well, I've got to declare my hand here. I'm a firm believer in giving people second chances. No, not everybody, of course. And I certainly wouldn't give somebody as many chances as, say, Peter Mandelson has had over the years.
Yeah.
But I do believe that, generally speaking, giving someone a second chance is a very good and productive thing. Joshua Bonehill Payne is now 33. So when he was jailed in 2016, he was 23. And I would think perhaps a rather immature kind of young adult. He has served his time. He has repented. He has realised the error of his ways. He's made that all perfectly clear and very public. And so I think he does deserve another chance in life. But, and it's quite an important but, I would say not as an elected official. I think that's a bit of a stretch, him then standing to be elected as a councillor or an MP, although, of course, he was never being considered to be an MP. I think that Kemi Badenoch's support for him, she's been very vocal, and that's okay, that's a matter for her. But I think they've actually reached a really good kind of compromise here. I think the Tory party have very sensibly now, okay, appointed him as an advisor to the Tory party's Culture and Integration Commission. And it then says what he's going to be focusing on, specifically focusing on how young men become radicalised. Boom. Well done, the Tory party. That's where to have him engaged, employed. And if he does that for a number of years and he delivers results, in other words, he reaches out, he works very hard, he turns people away from going down a dark, grim, very unpleasant and illegal path, then I would say, well done, Mr. Bonehill Payne. And then perhaps that might be the time to reconsider whether he should stand for election.
A lot of people have piled in. I don't know whether Reform UK did pile in on him, but we know that he was also selected by Reform UK to be a candidate, and he's responded to that on social media. He says, last year, before I made the excellent decision to rejoin the Conservatives, because Kemi Badenoch is great, I foolishly applied to become a Reform councillor and even passed vetting and security. Last year, Reform were more than happy to have me. I didn't want them, though. So that's his swipe at Reform, whatever one makes of that. This is the guy that actually, for those who don't know, for the rest of the time, he's making those rather amazing AI videos of politicians. You know, you often see one at Kemi Badenoch doing a rap in the House of Commons, or a recent one yesterday of Reform UK and Dad's Army gear on the cliffs of Dover. And he's done these brilliantly. I mean, they've taken, I think, 40 million or so kind of hits around the Twitter sphere and YouTube and the like. So he's made an impact in that respect, and whether political parties thought he's quite useful for that reason in terms of, you know, appealing to a certain audience with how he's able to sell political messages. I don't know if it was that or not. So that's who he is. Does he deserve a second chance? 0344 499 1000. One former Labour MP, now in the House of Lords, Luciana Berger, she was particularly affected by this because he went for her back at this time. She gave evidence at the Old Bailey trial, as well as I understand it. It was all grim stuff. He was giving the Nazi salute, apparently, to his supporters in the gallery. She was very distressed by this. She says her view is, yes, you can redeem yourself, but standing for public office is a step too far.
I think at the moment it is, as I've made perfectly clear. I think his rehabilitation period, in terms of being a force for good, needs to be a bit longer. He's only 33 as things stand. And there's a much broader issue here, though, that I think we need to consider as a nation, if I may. We've got a prison crisis, overcrowding crisis. We've got a law and order crisis. The criminal justice system, as we know, is broken in just about every aspect of it. So we do want, I believe, and we should go in, take responsibility for it, appreciate the harm that they've caused in terms of victims they've created, damage, cost to society and the such like, and then turn their lives around, learn from their mistakes, and then want to reintegrate into society, work hard, pay their taxes. We need to give those people a second chance. We need to encourage people to behave in that manner.
On that very point, let's get a voice note on this issue from Mark. Morning to you, Mark.
This is Mark from Essex. It's a bad look for Kemi Badenoch, I think. I don't think it looks good. I remember the BBC or one of the television companies hiring people like burglars to present or give advice on security in the house, sort of like watchdog type programs. Also, there's a lot of sort of government agencies like youth clubs and the police that use reformed drug dealers and robbers, gang members, to steer kids away from that life. So it can happen, but I just don't think it's the optics are very good in this case. Cheers, mate.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes from Dawn, who says, this is reference to the neo-Nazi Tory story. Morning, Ian. In regards to this, the selection endorsed by Kemi, what you have to ask is, if it had been Nigel Farage endorsing this man as a reform candidate, what would the reaction from the Tories, the other parties, news outlets have been? Farage would have been hounded unmercilessly. Unmercilessly is the word I was looking for. Correct. I think Dawn makes a fair point there. I think there would have been an outcry on this. But I tend to agree with you, and also our last voice note that we had, that, you know, it's not unusual in youth club settings. You know this from being a cop.
Yep.
That, you know, people who've done a prison sentence, they've been in for, they were a dealer, they were, you know, up to all sorts of what they call petty crime, but it culminated in something bigger. They served a substantial prison sentence, came out, now run the local youth club. They've done that for 40 years. They've educated more kids out of crime than anything that would ever match they would have done in their previous past. You know, we applaud that and go, that's exactly the kind of thing we want to happen with justice, that somebody turns it around and turns it into something good.
I've met a number of people in recent times as well that have served pretty heavy jail terms, and I'm talking in the region of 8, 10 or more years. And of course, when you spend that amount of time behind bars, not only do you have a lot of time to reflect on what you did, the damage you caused, and the future life you want for yourself, they have an absolute determination not to go back, and they also feel obliged to pay their debt to society long after they've come out of prison. And they've set up companies from people that in boilers, because they've had training. You see, when you're in prison for 10 or 12 years, the prison system can train you. It's got time to work on you. And they've come out and they've been plumbers, carpenters, electricians, and they've gone on to set up their own companies. And then they've employed people, and then they've paid taxes. I mean, they've made a great contribution to society after realising the error of their ways. So we don't need to write somebody off because they've made a mistake at some point in their life. And let's face it, there is somebody in the cabinet who I do question whether she should be in there. Don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but I'll get to the point. Louise Haigh, for example. Okay, who committed a crime of dishonesty. That's my problem. That's where I look at that particular offending. The reporting of that phone being stolen when it was a crime of dishonesty. Now, I think that's another question, another debate to be had. Is someone convicted of a crime of dishonesty, should they run for elected office? She did, obviously. She's an MP, and now she's the deputy PM.
Essentially.
So we kind of, it's complex. It is complex. And different rules need to apply, I think, if you know what I mean.
Got it. Meanwhile, back to the Reliant Robin.
Oh, my word.
By the way, the Reliant Robin was made by the Reliant Motor Company, often known as Reliant Motors, which was a British car maker. The US Embassy in London used a small fleet of these, as we discussed, three-wheel vehicles for running local errands, courier services and general transport around congested streets. So that's what they were all about. A few people have highlighted that point. Thank you to Stone Me and others who've done a bit of research on that. This from John in Bristol. My uncle used to drive a bubble car, a one-seater three-wheeler.
I remember those. And they opened at the front, didn't they? The door opened at the front. Yeah, it swung open and then you clambered into it. They looked like death traps to me.
Do you remember they used to have that, and it was terrible that they did this, the disabled car, that light blue thing?
Yes.
That they were all the same colour, but they just told everybody, here's a disabled driver, everybody. Look, point to the disabled driver. I think they were I don't know what the hell they were.
May I point out that I think there are abuses of the Motability system?
You think?
I think there are.
I think so.
But I think they're going to try and clamp down on those. I'm all for giving disabled people the best life they can have. Those who are, you know, severely disabled, who are absolutely, living a kind of life that fortunately we don't have to. I want to give them the best. I'd like to see disabled people get more benefits as it happens.
Yeah.
So that, but that of course.
But you'd
would
like to
entail-
define what disabled is before.
Yes.
before
Yeah, I
you
mean,
go.
I'm no medical person, obviously, but I think probably your smart audience have all got. We'd be pretty close to what we think is severely disabled or disabled and deserving. Disabled and deserving. Give them more. The undeserving, cut their benefits. That's my attitude.
This from David Thomas, morning Ian and Peter. Reliant, in the late 70s, I was driving to the south coast with a Robin in front. We encountered a smooth bend and it promptly fell over, gliding to a stop on its side. All very amusing. Also, remember that Reliant also produced the Scimitar, which my mate had and was a thing of beauty. What is the Scimitar?
I remember that, but can somebody answer the question for me, please, before I leave at the top of the hour? Was the Reliant Robin made out of metal or fiberglass?
Paper mache. It's a good question. You're determined to say fiberglass.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Louise in Ipswich says, if prisoners have to be released, why not release those guilty of the most minor crimes? Well, you'd think that would be the obvious way to start. Cliff in Berkshire, when people are released on early release from prison, I assume they will be monitored. However, I cannot see how these two travellers could be monitored, nor how they could be prevented from disappearing into the travelling community.
He raises a very, very valid point if they are of the genuine travelling community. And
So you think they'll be
move
protected
around.
by their own community? They move around. They're mobile and
You see, if
never
you're
in one place.
yeah,
I don't know
but-
how that would work.
Well, if you're released early and you're on a tag, these tags can be very accurate in terms of monitoring the space in which you are allowed or restricted to be. For example, you can have a tag that restricts you to your home and does not permit you to go in the garage, for example.
Yeah.
So if they are legitimately of the traveller community, how would such restrictions be applied? Because you don't want people going out on a tag and thinking they can do as they like, would you?
It's a fair point. On the heat wave, Laney in Essex, it was Laney, of course, that started all of this about 6 weeks ago or whatever with her... Laney lives in a mobile home, as I remember, and she was scuppered because of the heat, because it was like 40 degrees inside that thing.
Yeah.
She says, almost ignoring her previous on this, she says, heat wave help. I've slept in the kitchen, the bathroom, and 3 times in the garden. Not the most comfortable, but definitely cooler. Yeah, a mate down the road did pitch a tent in his garden and slept in it a couple of weeks back because he said it was cooler.
You wouldn't even have needed a tent, would you? A night under the stars has a certain romance to it. I went to Australia many years ago.
Yeah.
And we went on a little cruise on a catamaran boat for 2 or 3 nights.
Just sleep on a lawn?
And we actually slept on the top of the boat, like, you know, on a little kind of cloth type thing, actually staring up, looking at the stars. And it was, I'm going to sound like, it wasn't spiritual, but it was rather nice, because the skies down there are so brilliant because there's not the pollution that they've got.
The trouble is, Peter Blexley, ferrets.
Ferrets, not on a boat.
No, in your back garden. You don't know what could climb over you at night.
Squirrels.
A troublesome badger.
Hedgehogs.
Hedgehogs. Foxes.
Foxes. Foxes down my way have been a problem in South East London. We're plagued by foxes.
Yeah.
And they're noisy. And if you have one of those defecate in your garden, oh, the stench.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to do a Jolie and Morn on them, you know what I mean?
Batter it with a baseball bat.
But I'd like them to be controlled.
On Boxing Day. Yeah. There is a problem with the fox, and if they did that on your toes while you're sleeping in the back garden under the stars,
yeah,
you don't want that. Antelopes, you can have all sorts of things in your garden.
Not in my part of neck of the woods, but you know.
Bats, there's another one. Bats, flipping vampire bats out there.
Bats,
especially in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, true.
From Michelle, Michelle in Altrincham says, love watching you in the mornings. A little history on this car. The Reliant Robin from 1973 was built by the Reliant Motor Company, designed by Ogle Design. as an affordable, fuel-efficient vehicle. Although the Reliant Robin later gained a reputation for tipping over, it also became one of Britain's most recognisable and iconic vehicles, earning a lasting place in British popular culture. Dare I say for all the wrong reasons? I don't know. I mean, it was...
Dylan Rodney, like...
Yeah, I mean, it is
iconic,
iconic, but iconic doesn't mean that it's, like, it was great.
But it was great in that show, and that show was wonderful.
Oh, Fools and Horses is something else.
Yeah.
This one from Dave, now in Tenbury Wells, says, "Morning, Ian. Back in the 90s, I worked for a design consultancy in Bond Street. I was given the task of redesigning the Reliant logo, which was on the front of all Metro cabs when Reliant took them over. London was certainly something that was better 25 years ago as well."
There you go. Everything was better.
Yeah. So Dave redesigned the Reliant logo. I don't even remember the logo.
Nor do I.
Was it a robin? Did it have a robin on it? I don't think it did.
That's still something to have on your CV, isn't it?
It looked like a big whistle, didn't it? It just looked like a massive whistle.
Yeah. Yeah.
This in from Mags. He says, "The only car my late brother had was a Reliant Robin. He loved it. Think Princess Anne even had a Reliant Robin."
Really?
Yeah. Mags says, "P.S. sleeping in the kitchen, not far to go for breakfast in bed." It's a fair point.
Very good.
Well, there's the logo for the Reliant Robin. It just says Reliant, and there's a little castle sort of underneath it. I have no memory of that at all.
The things you learn coming into this studio is remarkable.
It is an education, Peter.
It really, truly is. Truly, for which I'm very grateful.
I should hope so as well.
Yeah, extremely grateful.
Yeah, it is. All sorts of things come out the traps early doors when we sit here on Talk Breakfast. And one here from Paul, who says, "You didn't need a driving licence for a three-wheeler. It was classed as a moped, or some say a motorbike." And on the DEI professor, or the allegations that he was hired on that basis, Michael says, "The exposure of Professor Arday of Cambridge University reveals the DEI industry in all its squalor and the standard of expensive education fed to our youth. Will anybody be held to account?" He's resigned now, anyway. We're out of time, Peter.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you to the audience for teaching me so much about Reliant Robin and other matters.
Education.
Wonderful.
See you next week.
Look forward to it.
Peter Bleksley with us here on Talk.
We've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves actually with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, "You got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll."
The Home Secretary Ministry has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this. And let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall, boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year. So that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Think about a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work it out.
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said to consummate fury from most of us that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
We have to protect them.
Well, there's also protecting the border as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning. Welcome to Talk Breakfast, Thursday, the 6th of August. Collins in for Kyle for this week and for next. Lots to get through here. Here's a question. What does redemption and forgiveness look like? This is the story of the former neo-Nazi who was selected as a Conservative Party candidate for his local council. He's now stood down after the row erupted. Should he have ever been selected is the obviously instinctive way to look at it. Or do you have a different view? Do you have this view that someone with a grim and, in this case, anti-Semitic past is actually more informed, more experienced to teach the perils of extremism and radicalisation? Does it put him in prime position? He is set to still be an advisor to Kemi Badenoch, we understand. Details of that. And talking of walking the plank, what about this character? Professor Jason Arday, resigned now from the University of Cambridge after it was revealed he'd falsely claimed to have published a book. I mean, that's a big claim, because it is kind of checkable. He was also, and is also, being investigated following new information about his qualifications and honorary appointments, many arguing that this man was appointed solely because of his DEI characteristics. Is that just offensive, or is there some truth in that? Also, the petition to stop the killers of PC Harper being released is fast approaching 500,000. Thoughts continue on that one. Elsewhere, and talking of justice, the Met Police officer who shot Chris Caber will not face misconduct proceedings. This is the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct. A victory for common sense, of course, and policing. And we discussed this endlessly in the first hour. It's 25 years ago today that they stopped producing the Reliant Robin. At what point did somebody go into a showroom and say, I want that one? Yeah, give me the car with one less wheel, please. A quarter of a century ago, they said we can't take it anymore, and they ditched it It was British made through and through. Those who loved it, apparently, absolutely loved it. And it does prompt a question. What was better 25 years ago? According to you, quite a lot. We'll have more on that as well. This comes from Jeff in West Sussex. He says, when I was a young lad, our neighbour had a Reliant Robin. He also had a rather overweight wife. And when setting off down the road and turning right, he'd mastered the turn with one wheel off the ground. You see, physics will dictate certain things, which is a bit like the motorcycle and the sidecar. There was a fella in our road when we grew up. There was a sort of hippie family. They were a really nice bunch. And we were quite sort of friendly with them. And they were about 5 doors up. And he had a motorcycle with a sidecar, and off she would go, his wife, in the sidecar. Down the road on trips they would go. She had those goggles on. It was like... was it On the Buses where Olive and... what was his name? I can't remember. Stan and... Anyway, whoever. Olive was the passenger in the sidecar. And regularly left the tarmac, of course. Reg was it. There you go. Stan and Reg. 0344 499 1000. Well, we're taking memories on this, and it's an interest. We didn't expect this to get so much response, but that is the beauty of talk. We'll talk about the serious stuff, and we'll come on to that in just a second. And then some of the more flimsy, but always slightly amusing stories as well. Your thoughts and voice notes. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word with James Price, former government advisor and Reliant Robin expert. I know you got a whole collection of them, James, so, you know, if anyone's the man to talk to, it's you.
I'm not sure that the suspension on one of those things would be able to get me around a corner at any wheels or any speed at all.
Yeah. What was interesting that we've discovered, and only by bringing up these kind of what appear to be fairly superficial subjects, you end up... We've had quite a lot of good factoids come of this. It was British made. The American embassy ordered a fleet of them for mooching around London, doing their small chores and things. That was a bit bizarre. Also, you only needed a motorbike licence to drive one. And
that sounds incredibly civilised, isn't it? Do you know what we should do? If we want to bring these things back and we can replace all the little mopeds that zip around and blight our streets with a kind of fake Deliveroo bag on, weaving in and out. And they've all got L plates on, haven't they? Because presumably there's some kind of insurance or maybe even, dare I say, citizenship scam going on with them. Replace them all with these nice little fellas. That'd be lovely.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, and it was British made, you know, through and through. But they decided to ditch it because it looked like a horror story, I would imagine.
Well, it's the same people that make the van from Only Fools and Horses.
Yes.
The same idea.
Yeah, apparently that officially, somebody did tell us, I've lost the message now, that it wasn't officially it was a Reliant... The car in Only Fools and Horses wasn't a Reliant Robin, it was a Reliant Regal van. A different car, says Paul.
Beautiful. Again, I think we should bring these things back. And what we could do now is they'd be driverless. So you'd have even more space. You wouldn't even need a steering wheel in them anymore. Brilliant.
Yeah. I'm just a bit uneasy about the one wheel thing when two is an obvious option.
Look, there's 3 wheels overall. Come on. You could just rearrange it in sort of amusing ways. I think that'd be great fun.
Yeah, it's not like it is just on one wheel. I mean, that would be a feat of engineering, wouldn't it, if it was just literally just the one.
The sort of penny farthing of a car.
Some sort of penny farthing situation. I love it. Lots to talk about here. Can we start with this Cambridge professor, Professor Jason Arday, who's now resigned from the University of Cambridge? It was revealed, as I said a second ago, that he'd falsely claimed to have published a book. I mean, that is a big claim, James, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to make a claim, I know they say if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big one, but saying you wrote a book when it's imminently searchable to discover whether you did or you didn't, questions about his qualifications and his honorary appointments. The Good Law Project, which is a sort of... and I say this not to be mischievous, is a sort of a left-wing legal campaigning organisation who jump in on anyone that wants to say something that they disagree with on trans issues or the environment. It's run by a fellow called Jolyon Morn. He was the man who a couple of years ago, and it's only relevant, I say this, of course, to remind you who he is, who on, I think it was Boxing Day, wearing a kimono for some reason.
His wife's kimono.
His wife's kimono, went into the back garden with a baseball bat and clubbed to death a fox. Now, this is all shades of weird, and I don't, you know, but it's sort of compounded by the fact that this is a sort of a left-wing, I'm on the side of good, I'm a decent person, but decided... I mean, I've had foxes in my garden for years. I've never thought of clubbing one or harming it in any shape or form.
A very odd fellow in general, and I think that people knew the writing was on the wall for this fake Cambridge professor once the Good Law Project weighed in on his behalf, because, to put it mildly, they've not got a terribly successful track record. Let's just say, we are outside the European Union, despite Jolyon's best attempts at it. And so I think that he's never seen a Titanic he didn't want to jump on once he'd seen it already hit the iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, he's piled in on this and he's attacking newspapers for attacking Professor Jason Ardern. Let's have a listen to what the Good Law Project said.
And to the surprise of literally no one, from the start, newspapers like The Telegraph and The Times have been calling him a diversity poster boy and just overall annoying him. But now they're taking it a step further and they're trying to smear him with accusations of plagiarism, basically saying his work isn't his own and trying to discredit him. And it's really interesting because it doesn't matter that academic journals, universities, everybody that has looked into these claims has found no evidence of plagiarism whatsoever. The newspapers do not care. And we have to talk about it. A baseless smear campaign against a distinguished black academic isn't just a personal attack. It's an attempt to shut down a black person who has a platform.
So she said that on the 28th of July, and those claims have been fantastically rubbished since. So shame on her. Shame on her for suggesting that an editorial meeting in a newspaper, in this building, as it turns out, sat round and said, let's try and find a black academic that we can have a pop-up. I mean, the mere idea that that happened is balderdash. Secondly, the idea you just make it up is not true. Contrary to what some people, mischievous belief on Civvy Street. Newspapers don't just make something up. You've got to stand it up. You've got to be able to, you have it legaled, as the phrase goes. This kind of stuff runs through teams of lawyers before. It doesn't mean papers and other forms of media don't sometimes get things wrong. But they didn't just make up a story about a random academic because he's black.
There's so much in here, isn't there? I mean, first of all, it's great that you shared that clip because it is a take from that lady that has aged like a fine milk, hasn't it? And it's wonderful that these people are so arrogant. They think, you know what? I'm going to put my face out there. I'm going to say all this stuff now with such confidence, only to be proven wrong yet again. What, by the way, it's got to do with the law is beyond me, right? And it's more evidence that it's the Good Law Project or any of these other lefty organisations, that it's always just the kind of what I call the omni cause, that they'll jump on any bandwagon. It's Gaza, it's Palestine, it's the environment, it's Orange Man in America bad, whatever it may be. They just have to jump on this cause. And the same people who were epidemiology experts in COVID suddenly became European land war experts in Ukraine and then shipping experts with Iran and so on and so forth. So maybe what an academic would call a bit of epistemic humility from these people would be welcome. But the fact is that this guy is not the sort of person you want to be going out to bat to defend. If it wasn't quite serious for the implications for academic research and frankly for society more widely, it would be really funny because it's not like the guy was a genius con man. Every time he opened his mouth, stuff he said was really stupid. You see him be interviewed and he says things like, yeah, I just want the world to revolve on like an axis of love. Like, that doesn't mean anything. But because we had this thing for a while where if this guy was black, you had to suddenly think, oh, well, he must be really smart and genius and wow, does such an unbelievable disservice to the many intelligent and thoughtful black academics and black people in the country more generally, because now you're going to look at someone who is a smart black academic and you're going to think, oh, well, are you just a DEI person like this obvious fraudster was as well? And that's a terrible thing for all of us.
Yeah, and there's plenty of black academics out there, by the way, who've merrily and brilliantly gone on with their careers for years, who've never nicked, plagiarised or made up anything. And, the sense on this story is that Cambridge, like other educational institutions over the years, has been slightly under the cosh for, being too... if you like, too traditional and conventional, white, conservative, all of that kind of, of those boxes that we are told they've been up to over the years. And almost this guy comes along, he's a lot younger, and that was an attraction. He's not white. He's got this great CV. And the suggestion is that he was, far from the clip we played with a woman talking about, playing games of skin colour. The central suggestion to this, I stress the central suggestion from many commentators around this, is that it was about skin colour because he was hired for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think not just skin colour, but the guy has such a fantastical story in general, not just about his skin colour, but about the fact that he claimed that he couldn't speak until he was 11. He couldn't read or write until he was 18, and yet somehow he got himself a PhD. He then claimed, what are some of these things, that he ran 35 marathons in 30 days, he ran 600 miles in 6 days, that he had a brain tumour and had the brain tumour cut out only 2 weeks before his PhD viva, which is when you walk into a room full of academics and they throw aggressive questions at you about your PhD thesis and you've got to defend it in order to become a doctor yourself. And 2 weeks before successfully doing that, apparently, he was having brain surgery done. And then all this other stuff. He said that he wrote a book that he didn't. Probably at one point, if he hadn't been fired, he would have claimed to have been president of the United States and Pope and who knows what else. The guy's probably a kind of actually clinical a liar, frankly, because some of this stuff was so, as you said earlier, Ian, so easily provable. So the fact that this guy was such a rubbish candidate to do this with, to hold up as a poster boy, shows how, I think, kind of fetishized various minorities, whether it's racial minorities or neurodivergent ones, as in the new kind of parlance as well, and that these people in Cambridge were desperate to have this. And the fact that even though there is a lot of ample evidence on the central claim that he plagiarized, the fact that for so long Cambridge until last night tried to stick with him in face of blind evidence shows how bad this is. All you've got to do is go on, it was Nathan Kofnas, who was an academic who himself was hounded out of Cambridge for his research, who was leaked a load of stuff and then wrote it on his Substack. And you can see side by side the stuff that Ardé wrote was pure plagiarism from someone else, to the point that he plagiarized his own PhD thesis title and only changed a few words in it, but he changed enough of the words in it so that the apostrophe at the end of one word suddenly became a grammatical error. So he had a typo in his own PhD thesis title because he'd nicked it, and he'd nicked it wrong. This is not the guy that Cambridge should have trashed its reputation going out to defend. So I've got no sympathy for them whatsoever.
He said he raised £5.5 million for charity with all of those marathons, but he instead had actually been part of a syndicate of over 100 people, none of whom he could name because of non-disclosure agreements. The University of Glasgow, Ohio State University in the US, and Nelson Mandela University in South Africa also denied claims by Professor Ardé that he'd been a visiting professor at their institutions. The Telegraph also reveals that he falsely claimed to hold a master's degree in psychodynamic counselling from Birkbeck University. Durham University also contradicted his claim to be an honorary professor in its sociology department. I mean, this is a long old list of jip, lies and invention.
Yeah, it's just very weird, isn't it? And of course, again, it will harm real academics trying to do real work. But I think it should also help people realise that the academic world in general is in a pretty bad way. I say this as someone who's spent much of the last week working on a master's thesis of his own, and I promise I've not nicked it from anybody else. But you can see so much of the stuff that we pay for, by the way, that taxpayers pay for, is such unbelievable tripey. And honestly, I've gone cross-eyed trying to read some of this stuff and understand what these lefty academics are going on about. So in a way, it's better for Ardé to have been plagiarizing stuff, because when he doesn't plagiarize things, the work is even worse. That one of the talks that he gave is supposed to be about racism or something, and he goes off on some long diversion about Neighbours and Home and Away. And it's in the Australian soap opera. Yeah. It's all just total rot, right? Academia is supposed to be about advancing the very boundaries of human knowledge and uncovering the great truths of the world and beauty in the arts and all these amazing things that academia should be providing. And instead, it's a bunch of man-babies who've never grown up, who've never had a real job, frankly, and who are sucking off the taxpayer teat and should probably go off and do something better with their lives and contribute in some other way other than writing this interminable garbage that does nothing except, with the possible exception of having people like Ardé teach undergraduates to hate their country and to think that everything is racist and awful, whereas the obvious opposite is true in Britain.
Are you able to divulge your own thesis? What's this on?
It's very dry. Political legitimacy in the British system, and 1688 and the Glorious Revolution, and all the stuff that academics should teach kids but forget. I'll send you a copy when I'm done.
Well, I don't think you need to, because I was my email was recently hacked, and I was writing a thesis on the Glorious Revolution, and it's just disappeared from my computer, so I don't know where it's gone, James. I'm just saying, okay?
If I see it on the desk somewhere around, I promise I'll send it back to you, all right?
Yeah, I know what's happened here. This is a little bit of Professor Arday's resignation letter. He says, "It's with profound sadness that I write to resign with immediate effect from my position as University of Cambridge and Jesus College. When I accepted this extraordinary honour of becoming Professor of Sociology at Cambridge, it was without question the greatest professional privilege of my life. To become the youngest black professor of the university's history was something I could scarcely have imagined as a child growing up with a diagnosis of autism, unable to speak until I was 11 years old. The response from so many people across the world was overwhelming. Thousands celebrated not simply my appointment, but what it represented, the talent, perseverance and hope can triumph over and even the greatest adversity." He's even been accused of using AI to write. I don't know whether that's true. Everybody stands accused of some of that these days, but that's a little of what he said. Just briefly, while we're on all matters controversial, another appointment that definitely garnered a lot of headlines was the former neo-Nazi selected as a Conservative Party candidate has now stood down, saying it's obviously created too many headlines. I'm not going to stand anymore. Kemi Badenoch, interestingly, gave this man the green light. She still wants to use him as an advisor. We can't really overstate how bad his extremism was 10 years ago. Ended up at the Old Bailey, went to jail for this. While in jail, took the trouble to go through the rehabilitation, learned all about redemption and all about the issues and the errors of his ways, to the point that he now lectures and writes and advises various bodies and individuals on the horrors of radicalisation. So the interesting, almost moral dilemma on this, James, is, some would say, well, clearly you don't want this bloke as a candidate. Look at what he used to be, giving Nazi signs in the Old Bailey. Others will counter this and say, well, actually, he's the perfect example of somebody who'd been down a terrible road, redeemed himself, came back as a different person, and now educates others about the error of their ways.
I think it says something about society more broadly, that we have had so many years of recriminations and accusations and gotchas and all the rest of it, that it's almost impossible to imagine a world in which someone seeks and actually receives forgiveness. And it's not just forgiveness that is important in our society, in our history, frankly, in Western Christian civilization. It's the idea of grace, right? Which is to say that you forgive people even if they don't even necessarily deserve to be forgiven. We saw this with the widow of Charlie Kirk, the right-winger who was shot and assassinated in America, where his wife amazingly somehow forgave the person who murdered her husband, because that's the message that Christ teaches. That it's only that kind of grace, that kind of forgiveness, that means we've got any civilization at all, frankly, because if you hold recriminations and bitter hatreds that go on through generations, you can't build anything. And this chap seems to me like he's paid time inside prison, has learned the error of these things, and if not as a council candidate, then as an advisor seems like a good poster boy to have. Not least, of course, because the kind of neo-Nazism, however awful and all the rest of it that is, it's not the main source of radicalisation that we're going to be dealing with in Britain over the coming decades. Just look at the number of people that MI5 say are on their active Islamist watch list. It's 45,000 people they're watching. That's the size of Anfield damn football stadium, all full of Islamists who want to plot to kill us and destroy the country and all the rest of it. And I note that this is not the first time this has happened. The Lib Dems, by the way, fielded a guy called Majid Nawaz in Hampstead and Kilburn in 2015, who, lovely guy now, by the way, but he was a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir, mouldering away in an Egyptian prison until he was sprung from it, and Amnesty International got him before they went woke and said, maybe don't be an evil Islamist anymore. And he's been on the same journey, and he was allowed to stand for Parliament for the Lib Dems 10 years ago. So I think we should probably learn a little bit about Christian redemption and forgiveness and grace, and look inside ourselves before we throw things at others.
Yeah. Majid Nawaz. Bauhaus. Didn't we used to work with him, Christian? I thought we did. Name rang a bell. I think he went down a fairly conspiratorial path, didn't he, in the end? But that's a whole other story. Listen, James, we hit the clock. Great to have you on as ever. Have a cracking day. The weather is still good. It's still summer out there. James Price, former government advisor, with us on the programme. Lots still to come. We will talk in a moment to Roy Ram, former Met police officer, on the Chris Cubbas shooting and the officer who's not going to be prosecuted or any further. The IOPC, the legal case was over, but the IOPC case remained. Nothing to see here. Is his career now safe and back on track? Details to come. On prisoner release, let's get a voice note from Carl. Morning, Carl.
Morning, Ian. Carl from Coventry here. What gets me about this early release scheme is that they're not deporting the 10,000 or probably more foreign criminals in the jail. If they put as much effort to deporting them back to their own countries, there isn't a sane person that can look at it and say, why ain't they doing that? Because it's the first thing you would do. If you need space in your prisons, you would return every single foreign criminal back to where they live.
A week now spent learning the detailed ropes and the administration and all the problems that will face him a month or 6 weeks later on when events in the Commons, events elsewhere start hitting him. So I think he will come to regret it. I understand it's not just been in a job for a fortnight. He's fought an exhausting by-election. He was mayor of Greater Manchester. So I understand why he's gone, but I just think practically he is making a mistake.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Steve says, morning, this Cambridge professor, despite all his untruths, didn't the police spend several months investigating the reporter that broke this story? Something to do with being based on racism. Yeah, there was absolutely that. It was obviously doing this job, I feel quite protective over that issue of journalists being curtailed to legitimately follow a story. And if someone's cooking up some spurious and completely false allegation as to their motives, that makes it even worse. I mean, a free press, I mean, from the printing press, I could talk forever about this and the right of journalists to ask and to probe, and yet it's sometimes uncomfortable. And if it was never uncomfortable, I promise you we'd be sitting in a very naive world right now if those men and women who scribe and broadcast hadn't dipped their toes into sometimes really uncomfortable, often dangerous waters in order to bring the truth of a story, sometimes taking absolutely years to uncover. So the idea that someone doesn't much like what they're asking, so they'll just cook up a claim of, well, this is a bit odd, isn't it? It's like stalking and harassment. No, it's called journalism, and that's how we get to the truth. Good journalism we lose at our peril, and you won't generally find it on Twitter. 0344 499 1000. Thank you, Steve, for that. And Andy in Cornwall, if the disgraced academic was heavily questioned about his theses, how thick must the Cambridge academics be questioning him? Are they called Brexiteers? And they call Brexiteers thick? It's a really good point. A really good point from Andy. They were so seduced by this guy. He was young, he was a bit quirky, he was a bit cool, his backstory was great. It meant that Cambridge could, you know, sort of kiss goodbye to that same, as they saw it, sad, stale, male and white image, and really rock things in the sociology department. Get this cool kid in, basically. It'd be great. Youngest black academic we've ever had. The students will love him, and his backstory is to die for. It's marvellous, except quite a lot of it was not true. 0344 499 1000. You can voice note us on that. We've got everything from serious stories such as this, as well as the Reliant Robin. 25 years ago today, they ditched the Reliant Robin. There's also a story about people sleeping in their kitchen to stay cool. I don't know where you sleep in your kitchen, and your kitchen isn't always the coolest room. In fact, sometimes, unless you have the back door open, sometimes it's the warmest room, for obvious reasons. And there's also this story as well. The officer, the Met officer who shot Chris Carber, will not face misconduct proceedings. This is the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Roy Ram is with us, former Met police officer himself. No misconduct case. The legal case, of course, has happened, Roy, but now we know this man's job is safe. Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, and I'm very pleased to hear it. In my former life, I was privileged to be the commander of the firearms unit of SO19, and there were a number of occasions when officers were engaged in situations where they put their life on the line for us, the public, and face a disciplinary inquiry. What's happened here, I think, is a disgrace. It's 4 years for this officer to have been cleared, and even the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police has been, really determined in his defence of the officer. He was cleared of any criminal charges, and it took months and months for the IOPC to clear him, and then to say, basically, well, our thoughts are with Chris Carber's family. I have to say my thoughts are very much with the officer's family and his future, and I hope that, he can get past this and carry on serving Londoners bravely in the firearms branch.
Indeed. This was a man that used a car as a weapon, as we established earlier in the programme. Had that shot not been fired, we might well be talking about the death of this officer, not the assailant.
Yeah, and let's not forget the background of Mr. Carber. I think I'm right in saying that at the time of his of the shooting, he was in fact wanted on suspicion of murder in a nightclub in Hackney. This was not a traffic accident gone wrong. This was a determined, usually armed criminal trying to escape from police and using his vehicle as a weapon. So, yeah, let's get this into proportion. There are some very, very bad people out there, and he was clearly one of them. This officer did his job, and we have to find a mechanism that brings the facts together quickly and does not hold officers suspended for 4 years. Imagine I've had officers suspended, and the impact on them and their families. They lose weight. Their nerves are shot to pieces. They don't know what's going to happen, whether they're going to be able to pay their mortgage going forward. It's a tremendous burden on their families.
Absolutely right. And, the IOPC system, some claim it's got a little swifter, but you'll be more aware of this than me, Roy. I mean, this was 4 years. Some can go up to 10 years of investigating. I mean, how can it ever take a decade to investigate someone? Even on a good day, it can be, 18 months. While an officer's life is in limbo, as you rightly say, they're thinking about their future, they're thinking about can they pay their mortgage, their family are affected, people in the local area, the kids of the officer concerned, where locals will know who that person is, even if they're unidentified in the national press, etc. It is a horrendous sword to be hanging over the head of any officer. If one's done something wrong, we all agree. You throw the book at them, they're held to a higher account. But if they've done nothing wrong, and in this case, of course, a high-profile court case had cleared this officer of any misdemeanour, including murder, but here he was still to face, you know, the very organisation that you'd think, you know, on the outside would be more understanding than any. But arguably, I think you might even find out in years to come, this officer will say the IOPC investigation was far more traumatic than the one in the court.
I suspect it was. And I think, you know, as you're running your piece there, it's quite unique in many regards, in the sense that you had a full video recording of what happened.
Yes.
It's a case of having to search for witnesses and test the veracity of their evidence. The whole thing was filmed. You know, use some common sense here. Get to the right decision quickly.
Simple as that. Roy, thank you for your time. Great to have you on as ever. Get to the right decision quickly is the salient point there. He's Roy Ram, former Met police officer and former commander, as you heard there, of SO19, the armed unit of the Met Police. Thoughts on that one? It's the classic case. I've done a lot of debates on this with police officers, also with the IOPC and the various other legal bodies that sort of represent and get involved in this kind of stuff. And this invariably boils down to a police officer who has half a second to make a decision based on all of the factors that are around him, and men and women sitting at a desk watching the same video, not for half a second, for days on end, on loop, relentless, keep watching. You keep watching that, you're going to see something different. Oh, but there was a point there, wasn't there, where he could have... Look, if you look at his left foot moves towards the car as the car is leaving. So he had an opportunity to not fire. And all of these questions, the garbage and the nonsense and the horror of what happens to an officer where people who are not at the coalface have this chasm of time to retrospectively look at something and decide that, oh, it should have been like this. If you spoke to the officer would say, yeah, on an ideal day, I wouldn't have shot anybody. I don't wake up in the morning to use my firearm and kill people. I mean, it happens so rarely in this country. And you see cases such as this, you'd be forgiven for thinking it happens every flipping hour, let alone every day, let alone once a year, if that. It became a very high-profile case. He was taken to court. He wasn't guilty of anything, and now the IOPC have said there is no misconduct proceedings to carry on. And it could just be, and this happens, it's not unusual in the police, it could be that this officer says, you know what, I'm hanging my hat up now. I don't want to come back to this. I've been through the legal stuff. I've been through the IOPC stuff. I'm done. And I certainly don't want to go and carry a gun. I think I'm right in saying you don't get paid any more as an officer to be firearms. It's a voluntary position that you opt for. It takes a certain kind of officer. The training is robust. The stakes are incredibly high. In most police officers' career, in fact, nearly all armed cops will never, ever fire their gun. They might take it out. They might touch the holster. That's counted as contact with your firearm. They might remove it, they might aim it. They will very rarely, if ever, fire it. So when it happens, it's so rare. And those officers, even in those moments, are painfully aware of how high the stakes are in terms of their career, in terms of what could potentially happen if they make a wrong call. So none of this is done lightly. If you read some of the commentary, but there's a sort of anti-police brigade out there that hate the old bill. They will tell you on a regular, yeah, it's almost like the copper got up and said, I think it's a good day to go and shoot someone. And then you look at the backstory of the man that was shot. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. We'll also talk about the Good Law Project. The Good Law Project, of course, have been defending the Cambridge professor. They believe it's a bit of a pylon. Let's get a voice note. No, in fact, we haven't got a voice note on that. I tell a lie. We'll come back to that story as well. We're taking a short pause here, Christian, is that what I think we are. This comes in from No Name Giver. The Jason Arde issue is not a one-off. It is a feature of our failing academic institutions. And one here, Paul in Manchester, says, the guy who was caught out for plagiarism reminds me of the Leonardo DiCaprio film Catch Me If You Can. It's got those kind of hallmarks, isn't it? I used to work with somebody, by the way, in this industry that could tell whoppers, the likes of which, you know, things that are quite easy to prove didn't happen. You think, you know, he would say things like, yeah, I'm going to be the new programme director. And you think, really? This was in local radio when I worked. Yeah, I've just offered me the job. And he'd make up a fee and a salary. And then, like, you'd think, wow, that's amazing. And I know him really well. This is a good position to be in. I'm trying to get into radio. He's going to be the programme director. Fantastic. 2 weeks later, what's happened to that? Yeah, it's been delayed, mate. It's been delayed. Really? OK. 6 months later, yeah, I didn't want it. And that was just a minor example. I could write a book on that. You do meet these people. They live among us who just consistently and cannot help it. Telling a lie when you don't need to as well, which is always a curious one. You didn't need to say that. You gained nothing but a tiny moment of a Pyrrhic victory or a moment of euphoria, whatever it happened to be. More on that on the way as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Coming up on 7:45. Somebody here says our son-in-law had a Robin Reliant as his wedding car. It's quirky, isn't it? It's snug as well. Andy in Sheffield says, regarding Reliant Robins, if you've been a passenger in one, you were scared for your life. They were the original bone shaker. If you had piles, you were knackered. It wasn't a pretty sight. Great show, Ian and Guess. Andy, thank you very much indeed for that. I've never been in a Robin Reliant. I don't think I've even looked inside one. You know, when you would see them in the street, I don't think I've ever gazed in and thought, what does it look like? I don't imagine it ever had a sort of Elon Musk-like iPad sitting on the central dash. I'd imagine the dash was a very minimal affair. It was intriguing. The reason we're talking about this is it's 25 years ago today that they ditched it. It was British, though. It was British through and through. You didn't need a car licence. A motorcycle licence would have been fine. I'm guessing, despite the bone shaker properties of this car, as Andy just pointed out, was the insurance quite general? Was it all right, the insurance? Did people go for it because it was cheap road tax, cheap insurance, cheaper to buy? But then it had one less wheel. It should be cheaper, shouldn't it? Let's go to Oscar Redrop, former number 10 advisor, joining us on the programme. Oscar, good morning to you.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. Nice to have you with us. How's life?
Life is good. Life was good. I remember back in the day when I was young, my next door neighbour had one of those cars, or someone on my road had one of those cars, and I was fascinated by it as a kid. Yeah.
They were fascinating because you did sort of look and stare because they were a bit weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, they ditched them. They were never ever something that was aesthetically giving, were they? Really? I mean,
I'm going to try and buy one on eBay. That's if that's possible. I mean, you can get anything on eBay these days, can't you?
I reckon they're around, and some people have made the point that they might even have classic car status in some respects.
Love it. Anyway, sorry, I've really distracted you there.
No,
sorry.
not at all. It was something we brought it up in the first hour, and what tends to happen here, particularly here on Talk Breakfast, is that we just pick a sort of a bizarre, throwaway, light-hearted subject, and it seems to be the one that really gets legs. We end up with thousands of texts and messages. Not about the big serious stuff, about the Robin Reliant. Let's move to something more serious. What's your take then on a former neo-Nazi originally being given the green light to become a candidate at local elections, then steps down, now apparently wanted as an advisor by Kemi Badenoch. Two ways of looking at this. Why would you have a former radicalised extremist anywhere near your party? The other side, of course, as I keep going on about, is that this is a person that was an extremist, no longer is. When in jail, he did all of the rehabilitation stuff, went on all the right courses. He now teaches lectures and writes about extremism. So some would argue the perfect candidate.
Well, look, on a human level, I think when someone not only neutralises their past, as in, well, I am no longer a neo-Nazi, but actually does so much more than that. And actually, well, I'm now the opposite. I'm someone who, identifies and lectures and warns people around the dangers of extremism. On a human level, I think that's a really wonderful thing, actually. And we need space for that in our life, and arguably our politics. On the politics, though, and this is where politics is really horrible and brutal, actually, sometimes, I just thought it was a very bizarre hill to die on for the Tory party and for Kemi. Didn't make any sense. Even if, as I just said, on that human level, we absolutely need the space for people to reform their lives in real life. On the politics and the decision-making, where you need to think bigger, and you need to think more brutal, this is the reputation of the party, of leadership. For a local, council level, I just didn't see that as a hill to die on. It didn't make any sense.
It was very odd, wasn't it? Because, we live in a world where, politics has kind of changed, and picking up on things like this is the sort of territory we are in. It's exactly the ammunition you would give to your opponents, particularly the Labour Party. Reform on this particular one, we're not in a position to say too much because they'd previously offered this man also a position as a candidate. The Lib Dems have had parliamentary candidate that was, some might say a bit iffy in the past, but nonetheless, you've got a choice here. Luciana Berger, the former Labour MP, now in the House of Lords, who was one of the victims of this man. Her point was, yes, you can redeem yourself, and that's brilliant, but standing for office is should never, I think I've got it right, I'm paraphrasing, shouldn't ever really be open to you.
Well, I guess it's where you draw it's where you draw the line. I disagree with her on that. I think it's good and healthy to have people in public life that genuinely a warning against their previous lives. That's a very, very powerful message. Again, I keep coming back to it, though. The Tories and Kemi, during a relatively slow news cycle, right? It was just an unnecessary own goal for me. And I think you have to be brutal. And maybe they have a close relationship, Kemi and the individual. She still wants him to be an advisor. And again, I admire that sense of loyalty that you have to people. But just being brutal and just thinking about the party and herself and the direction she needs to take it just wasn't a hill to die on, and still isn't.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why you didn't need to go there. This wasn't, there was no necessity. I think, you know, if you're talking about people who've got experience in radicalisation and you want them as advisor, there's probably a big old pool to choose from who haven't got necessarily that kind of past. And I get it. This guy has redeemed himself and he's got back in the saddle, and he had, you know, a terrible past 10 years ago, and that's not him now. I get all of that, but you're absolutely right. Why the need?
And look, right, it's kinder to him, ultimately, if it hadn't got this far.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't have been under so much public pressure and scrutiny that he has now if it was dealt ahead of time, in a way. So sometimes it can be kinder to the individual, even if it doesn't feel like that at the time. You know, if there is a way that he can continue to do his work around extremism, you know, for the party, and there's a role for him in that sense, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think standing for the party in public office is wrong. And then making that weird distinction between, well, it's only council level. It's not like he's going to be an MP. That was a weird.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. So I've been a huge backer of Kemi, and this will not change that because this isn't a slight August. It is relatively small fry. But it was the first time in a while with Kemi I just saw a slight lack of judgment and an own goal that wasn't needed.
I 100% agree. It was a very weird hill on which to appear. Let's look at this story. Talking of iffy characters, allegedly, the Cambridge professor, Mr. Arday, Professor Jason Arday, now resigned from the University of Cambridge, has revealed he falsely claimed to have published a book. I mean, that's quite a big one, isn't it, to come? I mean, there's a lot of stuff he claimed, but claiming you published a book. Did he not think they might have heard of Amazon? And as you know, in the annals of academia, it's, you know, if you're looking for a very specific academic book that might not be on Amazon, you know, there's various fairly straightforward ways and means of discovering it. Didn't happen. One of many things that didn't happen in this man's life. He said, oh, it's all got too much for me, I'm leaving. So he's now resigned.
Well, I know nothing about academia, and I can safely say that when I was at university, I spent about 10 minutes in a library or lecture hall, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But
that wasn't reading books either.
No, it definitely wasn't in. But that aside, what I think has really struck a chord with the British public on this, and why it has kind of built this story, is it's that sense of fairness, right? And there'll be people out there who don't get all the trimmings of being a high profile, well-esteemed lecturer, and that life that it can give you, who are just working, breaking their backs every day at work, and then they go, hang on a minute, this guy's just lied to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's a very not the acts itself, but the story and the journalism, and actually the fact that the journalist came under attack, almost to prevent the story happening is so wrong, like you said earlier this morning, Ian. But the story itself is very British for me, as in, we don't like this as Brits. This is something that really cuts against the grain of us. And look, like, has it gone a bit too far? Is this guy a minister of state? No. But, it's really caught fire in the national... But then you go, well, at any point, if he could have just said, no, I did publish this, and I was a visiting lecturer at this university. Here are the receipts, guys. Everyone leave me alone. And then everyone would have gone, oh my God, right, okay, this has all gone a bit too far. But he hasn't been able to do that, right? And I would hope, and we've talked about second chances with the previous story, I would hope he takes some time to reflect, and that we remember at the same time he hasn't killed anyone, right? But he does take some time out of public life to reflect on the, I guess, the lies that have just been told at this point.
Yeah. What do you make of this kind of, people talk, this wasn't an idiot. This was a guy that was clever.
No.
He was, he had qualifications. There's no doubt about that. It's just that some of the backstory, whether it was raising money for charity, illnesses, the timing of things, the lack of not publishing a book and saying he did, etc., all of that stuff. The suggestion is this guy, it was such a seductive hire for Cambridge when he showed up, because he wasn't just a young, in terms of his... qualifications. He was young, he was a young black guy, he was a bit quirky, he was quite fun. This was Cambridge's dream, because for years they've been accused of being white, male and stale. And this fella comes along, and he's ticking every flipping box, because not only is he very clever, which again I'll reiterate, he is. He's not a phony in the sense that he's not qualified to teach and lecture, but all the other stuff that went with it, they obviously thought that they'd struck gold here over at Cambridge.
Yeah, and look, like, I'm probably going to come across a little bit Peter Hitchens now, or Peter Hitchens light. But I do think the other reason why this story has caught fire is it does cut into and cut across that sense that academia in this country has fallen very, very far. And that actually that rigorous, no frills, isn't he cool? And wouldn't he indicate as an institution that we're down with the kids? How far have we fallen in a sense? Like that, our top universities were meant to be the complete antithesis of that. It was just rigor, the brightest, the best, the most qualified, where we can really test ideas and we have we grow and we kind of hothouse the brightest and best minds in this country. There's no time for being cool or, what would this look good on a PR release? And, could this person go on the One Show and look like we're down with the kids? That was the opposite of what our best universities were meant to engender. Absolutely. And it does feel like that U-turn they have taken is quite depressing. But again, as someone who took their studies so unseriously, I don't feel particularly qualified to pass judgment on the subject.
Yes, but your qualifications are real and your backstory is definitely real.
My lack of qualifications are very real, yeah.
Well, the 10 minutes in the library swung it for me. I'd hire you on that basis alone, Oscar. Some brutal honesty. Love it. Oscar, thank you. Oscar Reddrop is former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Thank you to him. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note on matters as diverse as the Reliant Robin. Yeah, bit of retro look at that one. 25 years ago today, it was trashed. They did away with it. And the more serious stuff, as we've been talking about, the claims of professors and, of course, the issues around law and order too. Details to come. Let's get the news headlines next here on Talk.
I think what he suspects is that the leadership of Reform is in trouble with all these scandals, apparent scandals over donations. Reform, nevertheless, is well known across the country. Reform as a vehicle is capable, if it has the right leadership, of actually forming a government. And that with the weakened leadership of Reform, there's a risk that Reform itself will be lost. And he doesn't want to lose the potential of a vehicle that could provide the kind of government that he and I and others wish this country to have.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The
entire city is being overwhelmed, and there are people who bear direct responsibility. Those responsible are the national government, led by Pedro Sanchez and his ministers, as well as Mr. Marlaska, and of course, the European institutions, which have completely failed in what's supposed to be the European Union's external border.
Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
Well, Morocco, of course, is hosting the next World Cup. I mean, are we suggesting that...
Oh, don't start me on the World Cup. We'll get
the country that is hosting the next World Cup is too unsafe. It's so unsafe.
Oh, great point.
That people have to cross continents to come to Europe. And of course, I have seen personally examples of this. People come from Morocco into Spain, across to the mainland, up France, through the south of France, up to the north of France, where they reach Calais and then eventually come to the UK.
Leading the country. And what that is weak law, bad management, but very liberal law. They passed a couple of laws, and people read. You know, people are smart. They read from other countries, and they swam that 3-mile sweat law, however they got in, but nobody's seen anything like it. That will look good compared to what's going to happen to the United States. The biggest thing, the worst thing that Biden did is allowing 25 million people into our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of Common Sense. It's a Thursday. It's the 6th of August. It's sunny out there, and it's Collins in for Kyle for this and for next week right here on Talk. There's a fairly busy news agenda, as you might imagine, as there always is. What does redemption and forgiveness look like? The former neo-Nazi, as we've been discussing, who was selected as a Conservative candidate for a local council, he's now stood down, whether his claim is, I'm a hindrance, I'm a distraction, whatever it happens to be. Should he ever have been selected? Or do you take this view? If somebody has a grim, and in this case, anti-Semitic past, does it actually make them a more qualified person in the sense that they've been through the mill, come out the other side, learnt the error of their ways, and can now teach people about the problematic path of radicalism? Thoughts on that? And talking of walking the plank, can't really leave this one alone. What about this character? Professor Jason Arday resigned now from University of Cambridge after it was revealed that he'd falsely claimed to have published a book. He was also being investigated following a new information about his qualifications and honorary appointments. Many arguing this man was appointed solely because he wasn't pale, male and stale, and that's exactly what Cambridge wanted. Thoughts on that? The petition to stop the killers of PC Andrew Harper being released is now approaching 500,000. People feel very strongly about this. Will the government change its mind and take these killers off the early release programme? And on a lighter note, and this has really fired up the messages this morning, it's 25 years ago today they stopped producing the Reliant Robin. At what point did somebody go into a showroom and say, yeah, I want that? Give me the car with one less wheel. A quarter of a century ago, they said, we can't take it anymore, and they ditched it. But those who loved them really loved them. And what was better 25 years ago as well? That's a sort of odd question we've also thrown in as well this morning. Let's get a voice note on that first subject, though, of the former neo-Nazi, set to be potentially a Conservative Party advisor on extremism. This comes from Sean. Morning, Sean.
Morning, Ian. Sean from Grimsby. This ex-neo-Nazi story, it's quite a difficult one, I believe, because regardless of what people say in this country, the Brits don't like Nazis. Our great-granddads died fighting these people. So I'd asked, would I trust them? Not particularly, being the next neo-Nazi, just like I wouldn't trust Louise Hay with my bank card, mate. Great show.
Louise Haigh with your bank card or your mobile phone insurance claim, maybe. Let's speak with Lord John Wigwood, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. John, good morning to you. Always great to have you on. I mean, it's an interesting one, this. We were talking with Oscar Redrop just before the news. Why do you sense that Kemi Badenoch felt the need to even go there with this story? It would have been much more politically convenient to say, you know, this man will not be a candidate and we don't want him really around, you know, regardless of the fact that he might have redeemed himself and does great work now on extremism. Let's just not go there. But she did. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think she's now saying, quite understandably, that she needs advice on how to stop neo-Nazi propaganda and the ways in which they tempt young people into the wrong ideas and wrong actions. And who better to have advising her on that than somebody who went through that, got it completely wrong, and has now agreed he got it completely wrong, has apologised, and is now trying to do something about it. He is trying to stop people doing this in future. And so I think the leader's quite right that he could be quite helpful in stopping others doing it.
But of course, we live in a world now in politics where any just minor transgression to more serious things, doesn't matter what it is, others will make political capital out of it. And this, I would imagine, you know, Andy Burnham wouldn't have let this one go at the first PMQs when they come back in September.
Well, no, that's understandable. But Kemi Badenoch is a very brave lady, and she knows what is right, and she goes for it even when it's not popular. And this clearly wasn't a popular move, but it's a perfectly sensible move, because she is right that we don't want these radical, nasty brands of ideology causing protests and divisions in our society. And she's shown that she is prepared to find out why people adopt extreme right, as they're called, attitudes, and showing that she thoroughly disapproves of them.
Indeed, somebody made the very good point a little earlier, John. They said, you know, there's plenty of people that work in communities and with young kids who themselves were previously in jail for drug-based related crime, turned their life completely around, spent decades, you know, and still do, working with young people to teach them the error of their ways. And we encourage that. In fact, we even use that as an example of a society that's worked.
Well, indeed, and as someone who gives her advice on some other subjects from time to time, somebody like me is no use to explain why people become neo-Nazis, because I couldn't think of anything worse, and I've no idea why people become neo-Nazis.
Fair point. But you can bring a plethora of other skill sets.
Maybe some other things. I can tell her why we're running out of money and the debt is outrageously too large. I can tell her why the fiscal rules are completely phony and will mean even more debt, because Labour have designed rules which mean they can borrow and pretend they're creating assets, which are actually a whole load of further liabilities on taxpayers. That's the kind of advice I can give. I
think when we last spoke, I can't remember what the story was, but there was something about how the debt, the national debt, is, you know, approaching 3 trillion or something. As I read today, it's now gone over that line, and it's more than 3 trillion.
Yeah, that seems to be the case, and Labour are not denying it. They're just saying, oh, we've got these wonderful fiscal rules. Well, what the fiscal rule says that is in 3 years' time, they'll get around to controlling the debt a bit better. But of course, 3 years never comes, because they roll it forward each year. And so the control never bites. The fiscal rules don't work. We've had fiscal rules since 2010. And over that time, the debt has gone through the roof, whilst the governments have obeyed the fiscal rules. We've got to get better at it. The only way to stop the debt going up is to actually make some spending reductions today, Mr. Chancellor. And there are some very easy ones to make. You could start with all that net zero nonsense and the carbon capture and storage and the over-the-top subsidies. You could go on to dealing with the Bank of England losses, which are way out of control. And they need to stop nationalising things, because, of course, the big nationalised industries, the post office, British Steel, these are now huge pensioners of the state, needing millions of pounds to keep them going every week.
Is there I mean, what is... you just alluded to and named some obvious areas. But, I mean, to get a 3 trillion... I mean, nobody can imagine what 3 trillion quid looks like, let's be honest. I mean, it's just a ridiculous number.
Well, it's £100,000 a family, that's what it is.
Wow.
That's something we can all understand. Unbelievable large amount of debt we're all lumbered with, thanks to our governments.
of debt, not £100,000 of credit, of course, which would have been quite nice if it was the other way around.
We're paying the interest on all that. Yeah,
absolutely bang on. So Andy Burnham, he's come in with this this kind of blaze of, I'm a normal bloke and I understand normal things and everything about me is normal. I've even got a normal accent and all the rest of it. In that respect, he should be able to or at least work out the logic of what you've just said, because a normal person wouldn't continue borrowing, they wouldn't continue nationalising, they wouldn't go down that path. There's nothing normal about that.
Yeah, but I think, you see, he falls for the political folly that, it's different because it's state debt and it's going to be sometime never and we don't really have to repay it. And I think it would be helpful if he thought about it in the way I've just explained it, that it's effectively £100,000 on average extra mortgage for every family in the country, whether you wanted it or not. And you will be paying the interest on that every year, again, whether you want to or not. And it's now crowding out better public spending. We'd like to have more teachers and nurses and doctors, and instead we've got to pay this ever-growing interest bill because our mortgage keeps going up. It's not like a normal mortgage where you take out a couple of £100,000 to buy a house and gradually pay it off. This mortgage goes up every year because they keep adding to it.
Yeah.
And the government is just a spendaholic. It just can't resist the temptation to spend more and to say, never mind, you can pay the interest and your kids can pay off the debt maybe sometime.
Sometime in the future, kick the can down the road. And another way of crunching that number, as I understand from the front page of the Telegraph today, Labour are borrowing £4,000 per second, John, which rather puts it into perspective.
It does indeed, doesn't it? And you have to remind people we're all going to pay the interest on that. It's not free money. And a lot of it is going to be wasted. And one of the things they could obviously do that would be very popular is control the number of illegals coming into this country, because that's an extremely expensive habit, to let them all come in and then put them up in hotels or HMOs.
It's interesting, whenever, I'm not the only one here, but when I put these kind of examples to ministers and those that in this case represent the Labour Party, they will usually come back with that same fairly predictable line, well, £2 billion a year, I'm talking about the migrant hotel bill, sounds like a lot of money, but actually in the grander scale it's not. OK, well, let's accept that, rather flawed logic, but let's accept it. On that one area, £2 billion a year, let's put in net zero, let's put in the nationalisation. When you start to add it all together, there is an irredeemable reality here. This is a man-made decision. They could change things if they wanted to.
Well, and what we're saying to them is we can't afford all the spending. We're also saying to them we think some of the spending's very good and we want it. We want to have a local GP we can go and visit. And there need to be enough of them. So we're saying to them, you, Labour, have a duty to weed out the bits of spending that aren't doing us any good or aren't so popular or aren't so important, because in total, you are overspending. You can't have a Ferrari and an executive house. You can't afford both at the same time.
Rather extraordinary. Let's just come to this story. It's just worth gauging your views on this. Here we are talking about people who've had to walk the plank, like the former Conservative candidate. We've also got this fellow over there at Cambridge, the Professor of Sociology, Jason Arday, who for weeks now, it seems that Cambridge and other interested, mostly left-wing groups have been protecting and talking about a witch hunt against a youngish black man, almost as if it wouldn't have happened if it was a white man. Yes, it would. The reason is because it's now been shown that there was a litany of, let's call it a litany of whoppers that have been told on this person's CV, including claiming to have published a book that he didn't publish, all sorts of claims on raising money for charity and goodness knows what else. He's now resigned. I think we could all say, well, rightly so. But how did it get to this sort of mess in the first place, where an institution, a globally renowned, respected institution like Cambridge University, fell for this old guff?
Yeah, well, I think Cambridge have behaved appallingly, and they've done this young man an awful lot of damage personally, because there are only two lines that Cambridge could have taken when these stories first started breaking. They could either have come out and said, you are completely wrong, here is the evidence, this is this man's work, this is why we rate it very highly, or they had to fire him. And they didn't do either. They just dithered and let the press run rings around him. And it would have been very good if he'd come on and given a straight interview to a serious journalist. But instead, he allowed it all to run on. So he has been more hurt and damaged by it. Cambridge has been deeply damaged by it. And people will be absolutely staggered that you can become a professor of Cambridge University without having all your claims about yourself checked out, or indeed that they might appoint someone who does fib about their CV. I mean, I know that you can fib about your CV and become a minister these days, but you'd expect Cambridge University would have higher standards.
Well, your thoughts? Is that why you chose Oxford over Cambridge, John, do you think?
That wasn't in my mind at the time. No.
I just wonder. You're right. Becoming a minister, because we do have somebody in the inner circle in Downing Street who's got a criminal record for fraud, and that seems to have been given a bit of more than a green light, really. I mean, yeah, maybe it's about forgiveness. Maybe we're being too brutal here.
Well, no, I don't agree with that. I think if you are taking one of the top academic jobs in the country, as a professorship at Cambridge clearly is, you need to make an accurate declaration, and your work should be peer referenced and assessed. And if there are issues over that, it's the university's job to get to the bottom of them, but it should also be their job to defend their choices, assuming they've done their homework. And it looks in this case as if Cambridge hasn't done its homework.
I don't know if you caught this story, because it sort of feeds into the whole focus on Nigel Farage and donations and reform. But there's now, again, front page of the Telegraph, Wes Streeting was bankrolled by a think tank that was linked to one of the world's most notorious fraudsters. Now, there's not quite an equivalence with other stories on this, but nonetheless, it's a terrible look that the Defence Secretary, as he now is, accepted £37,000 in donations from Labour for the Long Term, that is the organisation, back in 2002 and 2023, despite concerns among some senior figures in the party over the source of their funds. I mean, politicians have really got to be on this now, haven't they?
Yes, I mean, I think Wes Streeting will say he had no idea what the ultimate source of the money was, and there's some doubt about all that, but I think it's highlighted something Labour said they would control and change and not yet done so, and that is that you can have dodgier money going into a think tank than going direct to a politician. And that sort of launders or whitens it, and it's passed on to the politician. And Labour used to complain about that when they're in opposition. Yeah. Well, they've now got the power to stop it. Why don't they get on and stop it?
It's a fair point. John, thank you for your time. Always good to have you on with us. Lord John Redwood, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, still very much part of the Conservative Party. Stan, the man in Cheshire, says 650 million quid every day is what it's costing for all the illegal immigrants. Stop the problem, sorted. P.S. I personally don't owe a penny to anyone, says Stan the man. It's the best way to be. This one from Darren in Maidstone. You can't talk about three-wheeler cars without mentioning the brilliant bright orange Bond bug. It was the coolest thing ever. My uncle had one, and I think it was built in the 70s. To get in and out, the whole front windscreen and roof pivoted upwards. I don't remember those. I wish I did, Darren. I'm going to look them up. And there's a brilliant one from Rob, who encloses a photograph. Says, this is a picture of my stepson sat in the original Reliant Robin from Only Fours and Horses. One of John Sullivan's daughter-in-laws is an old friend and arranged for him to see it about 15 years ago. As far as I know, they still have it garaged. It's an iconic car and hopefully will stay in the family forever. What a treasure. What a cultural treasure. Lines are open. Let's get a voice note on back to the story of the former neo-Nazi. This comes from Sean. Morning to Sean.
Morning, Ian. Sean from Grimsby. This ex-neo-Nazi story, it's quite a difficult one, I believe, because regardless of what people say in this country, the Brits don't like Nazis. Our great-granddads died fighting these people. So I'd asked, would I trust them? Not particularly, being the next neo-Nazi, just like I wouldn't trust Louise Hay with my bank card, mate. Great show.
coalitions, i.e. cooperations in government, they achieve absolutely nothing. There is one party that has a real chance of winning a majority on the right in this country. We're going to fight to win. And we'd encourage everybody who shares the values that I talked about, who want mass deportations, who want a secure border, who want law and order, who want British people to come first, to get behind reform. But having said that, as Nigel said, of course we're willing to engage and talk to people from other parties, and that would include Rupert, yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning. Yes, 23 minutes after 8 is Talk Breakfast. Just trying to eat some as well at this end. Let's get a voice note on the Cambridge professor. This comes from Elle. Morning, Elle.
Good morning, Ian. Regarding the lecturer, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's as bad as Rachel Reeves lying on her CV, saying she was at the Bank of England for 10 years when it was less than 5, and she got away with that. The Johnny Reynolds, who said he was a solicitor and he wasn't, and he kept at that until they threatened him with suing him, the legal trade. I stupidly stole some cheese when I was 13 because we were so poor. I was actually hungry. It was cheese, nothing else. So I've got a criminal record, and all these years it stopped me getting a job because, unlike them, I would never lie about it. So there you go. He's disgraceful. He should get charged for that.
Thank you very much indeed, Elle, for that. 24 minutes after 8 o'clock. Let's speak with Mike Wood, Shadow Cabinet Office Minister. Mike, good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Just a word then, if you would, on the former neo-Nazi debacle. That seems to have kind of been settled in one respect. The man isn't going to stand as a candidate. The obvious question that naturally opposition politicians are asking this more forcefully than others, but how did this man ever get in the frame to stand for office in the first place?
Well, Joshua was very open earlier this year about his past, his conviction, but more importantly, of course, the changes that he's made in his life since he was in prison. He obviously went into prison as a very angry young man. I think he was about 21 when the offences were committed. But whilst he was in prison, not only did he find faith, he took part in the voluntary courses, understood more about anti-Semitism, and since he's come out of prison has been working to tackle anti-Semitism and extremism. You know, this is a serious issue, and if we're going to be serious about tackling the rising problem of anti-Semitism, we're going to need the experience and understanding that is available from people who were previously part of the problem, but have been rehabilitated, are reformed people who are now working to be part of the solution.
I think a lot of people understand how somebody in that capacity could be a great advisor. Many questioning whether you should stand for office. That's for some, that's a step too far, Mike.
Yeah, and I think it's a shame that he has felt that he's not going to be able to explain his position and how he has changed and demonstrate how he's changed, and so isn't going to be able to be a local government candidate. I think actually having that perspective and understanding on the council, he might have made a very good councillor. I am pleased that Kemi's going to now use that experience as part of her Culture and Integration Commission, actually working on the problems facing the country and how we can bring communities together rather than trying to, choose one part of the community over another, as all the other parties seem to be doing.
But you were always going to be a target on this one, weren't you? Which is why, not unreasonably, a lot of people are saying, well, why go there, Kemi? Why not just say, look, notwithstanding everything you've just said, Mike, we all understand it. Redemption. You've done your time in jail. You've turned your life around. You've got a great insight into the dangers of radicalism. It all notionally makes sense, but you were always going to come in for some stick on this.
But do we want our leaders to be making the politically easy choices or the more difficult choices that they think are right And I think in this case, Kemi has done what she thought was right, that Joshua did have something to offer to his community, also has something to offer, obviously, to the Culture and Integration Commission. And so I think, yes, absolutely. I mean, Kemi would have understood that there would be some political pain to bear, but she's always been someone who's been prepared to do the unpopular but correct things.
The former Labour MP, now in the House of Lords, Luciana Berger, she was one of the victims of this man's very brutal public anti-Semitism. She says the decision to welcome this individual as an advisor to the leader of the opposition is no better than allowing him to stand as a council candidate. It is a privileged and influential role. As a victim of this man's heinous crimes, this appointment is an insult. Well, I mean, on that point, I guess that's like suggesting somebody has to be unemployed for the rest of time, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, his behaviour to Luciana was horrific, and I can only imagine what it must have felt like to be on the receiving end of that. So, you know, I can't demand that Luciana forgives him. But as I say, I do think that this is a case where prison has clearly worked. He has come out of prison a completely different person to the person who went into prison, and he's spent the last the last decade, really, since he was in jail, working to tackle anti-Semitism and extremism, working with the police, working with the authorities, making sure that other young men don't get drawn into making the same mistakes that he did. And I think that's something that we really need in the country. In the same way as we use former gang members to better understand gangs, surely we need to use people who have been drawn into these evil ideologies to better understand what drags good people into these bad paths and how we can stop them doing so.
A word, if you could, Mike, on Kemi Badenoch's ruling out of any pre-election or post-election deal with Reform. I think she called them, she branded Reform woke. What did she mean by woke? I mean, you can accuse Reform of a lot of things. They're rarely accused of being a woke party.
Well, look, I mean, I think the big concern we have about Reform is their economic policy is all over the place in order to try and please people in different parts of the country. They seem to be backing some really quite socialist policies around nationalisation. They always want to be spending more money, whereas actually what the country is going to need is proper economic discipline. Only the Conservative Party's got that plan, Kemi's plan for a stronger economy as well as the stronger country. And so we need to be going out and persuading voters across the country why they should be voting for us rather than looking at how we can try and stitch things up before an election.
Would it not be, I know this is sort of, you know, in many respects it's old ground, and in another respect it's ground that's not yet been trodden because we haven't got to a point of another general election. But all the polls obviously say, well, Reform will win it, or they'll be the biggest party, might not have a convincing majority to govern. They would have to somehow find an alliance, a coalition with someone, and the smart money says it would be the Conservatives, and that wouldn't be ruled out, would it, if that were the predicament facing the Conservative Party post-election?
Look, I don't think anyone would be ruling things out before an election, because of course you have to look at. Well,
she's ruled it out. Kemi Badenoch has ruled it out, saying there won't be a post-election deal.
There won't be a pre-election deal, of course,
or a post-election deal.
Well, obviously, there will
be a post-election deal.
Who knows? It depends on the result that voters give us. But obviously what we've seen is that under Kemi Badenoch, Conservative support has been growing over the last 6 months, whereas Reform seemed to peak in the summer of last year. A lot of the polls are now actually showing Conservatives having more seats after the next election than Reform. And whenever the next election comes, we'll be obviously going out to persuade people. Obviously, this is a changed Conservative Party. We've got the plan that deals with the serious issues facing the country, and that actually we're best placed to form a government that delivers on people's priorities on the economy, on our borders. And I think only the Conservative Party can deliver that, and that's what I'll be working on, is what Kemi will be working on.
There might be one sooner than we think. We will wait to see what happens when Mr Burnham comes back from his Beano in Benidorm. Listen, Mike, great to have you on with us. Mike Wood is Shadow Cabinet Office Minister for the Conservatives. Thank you to him. There will be a deal if it ended in that way. I mean, it may well turn out there's a thumping reform majority if there was a general election tomorrow. But as it stands, if you look at most of the... Well, as it stands, actually, most of the polling is currently saying that Andy Burnham would win a general election. I don't know about that. But if it turned out that it was reform and it was a big win, but not quite enough for a majority, then there's going to be a chinwag with the Tories, isn't there? As sure as night follows day. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a call from David in Leicestershire. David, how you doing?
Hi, good morning to you.
Morning to you.
I was just listening to your coverage this morning about the Professor of Sociology at Cambridge University and how he's resigned with immediate effect. Well, I'm an academic at a well-known West Midlands university. I won't tell you which one. But let's say resigning with immediate effect is quite unusual. You normally have to give at least 3 months or a term's notice.
Right, yes, because there's ramifications for resignations.
Exactly. So you can speculate as to why this chap has been allowed to resign with immediate effect.
Yeah. Would that be because they've realised that he was being accused of is true?
I would imagine that would be a reasonable conclusion.
So they've come to, the usual thing that happens in so many high-profile areas is that they ask you to go but tell you can resign because you have a little bit more dignity in that position rather than being fired.
Your words, not mine, but I wouldn't disagree.
We will watch with interest how this plays out next. David, thank you. David's also a professor and knows how hard it is just to leave. David in Leicestershire, thank you for that. Lines open. More from you on the way. Just gone, well, it's 25 to 9, in fact. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. Homer Common Sense, Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the remainder of this week and next week as well. Joe's in Willoughby in East Yorkshire who says, morning Ian, I've been in stitches about the Robin Reliant reminiscing. It's formed a real theme this morning, that. Joe says, however, this false professor story has really wound me up and shows what's wrong in society today. Should he still be called a professor? Who the hell interviewed and employed him? Did no one check his credentials and believed this guff? Parents pay good, hard-earned cash to send their kids to universities only to be taught by a fraudster. The police spent 4 months investigating a decent journalist. Didn't any of the officers question the professor and look at the journalist's evidence? Our institutions and civil service are swamped with lazy idiots working from home and nothing works. It makes everyone's head spin. We are doomed, says Joe. It's a fair point. I have to say, in balance and for accuracy, he is still a professor and he is qualified, and his academic credentials are mostly still intact. But what's happened, it's the other stuff that's been bolted on, where he taught or where he was an honorary, whatever phrase you want to apply depending on the situation, what books he wrote, or in this case, didn't write, what money he, solo capacity, raised for charity that he didn't raise in a solo capacity for charity. It's all of that stuff that seems to have informed the wider story here, as distinct from the fact that, you know, he's a clever bloke and you put him on your pub quiz team, he'd probably be rather helpful. So in that respect, it's curious because and a shame for him in a way, because it means that people like Joe and me and others are now questioning the guy's entire existence as an academic and a professor of sociology, when in fact that bit he's done legitimately, but it kind of gets eroded a bit, somewhat diluted, when the stories of gibberish, guff and nonsense that are floating around this fella are growing by the day. For me, the bit that really riles me, and I think Joe shares that, is that they investigated a journalist who was trying to get to the bottom of this and suggested that this was a sort of a hatchet job, and the journalist was stalking him and goodness knows all sorts of other invented nonsense to make the story go away. Thank God for journalists like this. There's no right anybody investigating them for literally doing their job. And if they hadn't, we wouldn't be here now discussing this. We wouldn't know. Let's get a word from Linda Jubilee, journalist and regular with us on the programme. Morning to you, Linda.
Good morning, Ian.
I mean, I suppose there's such a thing as people embellishing a CV, and I think everybody to some degree, and usually in a fairly innocuous way, might have done that. You know, you were an advisor to the assistant manager of Iceland or something like that, when in fact you were a supervisor, not a manager. And those kind of things you might have done. But there is a point, isn't there, where you can take it to a level where it becomes rather dangerous. And I think this fella clearly got a job, at least in part, based on not just his academic qualifications may well have been sound, but all the other stuff. You know, what a great guy. He's done this, he's published that, he's done amazing, he's raised millions for charity, he had a brain operation 2 weeks before his exams, and goodness knows what. It's all that stuff. I mean, that's not helpful to anyone.
No, that's absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. And the fact of the matter is that his basic qualifications were fine. So I can't really understand why he felt the need to embellish so much, to, as it were, build ornate icing on the cake. The cake was absolutely fine.
Yep.
And that should have been enough, because he came from very difficult background. He had a lot of support, and he's credited those people who supported him. He did a tremendous job. And now I think his reputation does lie in tatters. And as you say, the reporter who was from the Times Higher Education Supplement.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about someone, you know, skulking through someone's rubbish bin in a dirty raincoat. We're talking about a highly qualified journalist who investigates him for many months, who is then investigated by the police. I mean, haven't we got that round the wrong way? It's ridiculous. But I think the broader issue is that this does happen in many areas of society. I don't think it should. Yeah. I mean, I know that everyone does the odd tweak to their CV, but that's really where it begins and should end. The fact of the matter is if you lie, so let's say, call it what it is, if you lie on your CV, it is incredibly misleading, and sometimes that's in a dangerous situation. And one of the situations where it is dangerous is in the field of academia.
100%. And yes, if you're applying for those kind of jobs, with respect to somebody who's a supervisor in Iceland, by the way, telling somebody that you're an advisor to the manager is not the end of the world. No, there's no danger to just slightly inflating a job title. But when you're working in the world of politics, academia, and, you know, Cambridge is a world renowned, one of the most famous universities on planet Earth. You know, you need the right people, people you can trust, people who are authentic in all respects, not just their qualifications.
You know, in this situation, and I do a fair bit of comms training, I go back to a famous quote from the German philosopher Nietzsche, who said, "You can lie to me, but it won't matter, but I won't believe you in future." And that's where we've got to here.
Yeah.
It's very hard to believe someone going forward when you absolutely know that they haven't told the truth in the past. So I don't understand why he did it, because, as I say, he had enough going for him to make this perfectly okay. But saying he had personally raised £5.5 million for charity when he knew it was a collective effort and he could not even name the people in that collective effort, I think dents his reputation and the reputation of the University of Cambridge.
Yeah, I once donated some money in a bucket in a pub to buy a brain scanning machine at some hospital somewhere. I think for me to claim that I bought a brain scanning machine would be quite something when I threw a couple of quid after some lagers into a bucket. Not the same thing, Linda.
No, and every year I'm an ambassador for a local charity in Richmond called the Victoria Foundation, if I can give them a little plug, and we support the careers of youngsters, actually, like Professor Ade, from compromised backgrounds who want to train as doctors and nurses. Every year we raise £40,000 at a single Christmas event.
Fantastic.
But that's not me doing it. It's not me doing it. It's a whole team of people who do it. I'm proud to be associated with them, but by no means did I play more than a small part.
Yeah, absolutely right. We've got a little clip here. I want to play you this because it is brilliant. This was one of the members of the Good Law Project. This was the sort of, I think fair to say, left-wing legal pressure organisation stroke group who have been backing this guy and saying it's a witch hunt and it's, essentially saying it's racist because he's a black guy and, you lay off this man. He's being stalked. It comes under the category of something that hasn't aged well. So this was said by one of their members back in July in defence of Mr. Ade. Let's have a listen.
And to the surprise of literally no one, from the start, newspapers like The Telegraph and The Times have been calling him a diversity poster boy and just overall annoying him. But now they're taking it a step further and they're trying to smear him with accusations of plagiarism, basically saying his work isn't his own and trying to discredit him. And it's really interesting because it doesn't matter that academic journals, universities, everybody that has looked into these claims has found no evidence of plagiarism whatsoever. The newspapers do not care. And we have to talk about it. A baseless smear campaign against a distinguished black academic isn't just a personal attack. It's an attempt to shut down a black person who has a platform.
Now, whoever she is, Linda, needs to give her head a wobble and get in the bin, frankly, because that's turned out to be completely utter garbage, what she said there.
She's building her own reality, and that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very dangerous thing to do. I mean, she's made several assertions in that clip. I haven't seen it before, but she's made several assertions in that clip, which I will say are wildly inaccurate, yet she believes it. She believes what she's saying. And that, as I said, is the road to peril.
I mean, the idea that, I said this earlier, that a group of journalists, particularly the Times and the education element, supplement of the Times, sat around a table and said, we've got a great story here of this iffy academic. Not only is it a great story, he's also black, which makes it even better. I mean, seriously? Does she really believe that somebody sat around and thought that? And, the profile of journalists that work on those titles is mixed anyway. So, I mean, it's just a nonsense, but it made her feel better to say it. I hope she feels thoroughly ashamed now that she realises the reality of those words.
And no real instinct for trying to find out the truth.
Yeah.
Just accepted what she believed herself to be the right thing without any real curiosity or investigative skills.
Indeed, and wanted to believe it. Linda, great to have you on with us as ever. Thank you. We'll speak again very soon. Linda Jubilee, the journalist and regular with us on the programme. This in from Nicola in Norfolk, who says, morning, in reference to the ex-neo-Nazi approved to stand for the Tories. I'm a bit torn, but on balance, I believe in the concept of being able to move on and get a second chance after serving punishment for a crime. What I think is very poor from Kemi was her dismissive message, lack of respect for the role of councillors. Yes, she did say it's not like he's going to be an MP or something, so almost like it's only a councillor, which is still an elected official job that carries pretty much all the same requirements and obligations as an MP, whether you're local, whether you're national. It's a good point. Dismissing it just dismissing it as just looking after parking and bins. Those are often important local issues to people, and a lot of people willingly give their time to be councillors, which is often a thankless task. Cracking point. I'm happy to make that point for you as well, Nicola. Thank you for that. Let's get a voice note on this same former neo-Nazi. This comes from Louise. Morning, Louise.
Morning, Ian. It's Louise from Sheffield. On the question of this person from the Conservative Party with a criminal record, why don't we just make it all even across the board and have a rule that nobody with a criminal record is fit for public office? This used to be a thing. Why is it not a thing now? Why are we having people in public office with criminal records? Whether they've done the time, been rehabilitated or not, they've got a criminal record. They should not be in public office. And that goes for civil servants and anybody else in public life.
That would be the way to draw that. Thank you for that, Louise. That'd be the way to draw the line on it. Wouldn't you just simply say, no, sorry, you've done this, and yeah, you're entitled to a new life after you've served your time, and yes, you've been through all the courses, but public office will always be a no-no, and that clears up any kind of mist around the story. And also this story, talking of what some are saying is overt deception. The BBC is accused of suppressing the nationality of the Afghan small boat migrant arrested over the murder of a British woman found in a suitcase in Greece. This is not a good look, and sort of rather compounds the suspicion that some people have of the state-funded broadcaster, that it is often guilty by not what it puts in, but what it leaves out. Sally Jones, former BBC presenter, joins us on this one. There was a couple of BBC stories out there this morning, Sally, but this does go to the heart of that. You know, it's an accusation that's made quite regularly to the BBC, and for a little bit they seem to get it and get a bit better at it, but they've dropped the ball on this one.
Yeah, they really have. And I think there's always the temptation, if the suspect is white or working class male, that particular fact is immediately made clear in any of their reporting. If it's any kind of migrant or anybody from a different nationality or from a different faith, they keep it incredibly quiet. I think that there's such a kind of feeling that they're somehow giving hostages to fortune by admitting that people coming into our country legally or people from different backgrounds might be committing quite a heavy proportion of the violent crime that's going on, that there's almost like a conspiracy of silence. And as you say, it's a very bad look indeed. They would have far more credibility if they were quite open about the nationality and the background of anybody committing a crime, be it white, black, whatever.
And you know this as well as I. We both work for the BBC, Sally. There's a kind of a sort of pervasive groupthink, isn't there, that sort of takes over, and you can almost see someone at an editorial meeting saying, but if we mention Afghan, that's a sort of pejorative. Well, it's not. It's part of the story. It's part of the news story. So best not mention it. And by doing so, you make the whole thing a whole lot worse. But that rather basic, I would say, journalistic fact seems to elude some of the great group thinkers over there at the BBC.
There's this sort of left liberal consensus that somehow we know better than you do. Therefore, we think that you plebs might start forming racist stereotypes in your mind if we actually reveal what background this particular person is from. And therefore, for your own good, we're going to withhold it from you. Well, the problem is that we all then assume that every single suspect whose race or background isn't mentioned must therefore be from some other background. And of course, most of the time it isn't, but they're really shooting themselves in the foot with this one. If they were open, then people would simply accept it. It's also a whole part of the narrative. It's part of what's happening in Britain today. Of course, when you get thousands of young fighting age men cooped up together, people are, in some of the sort of holding pens, or people simply flooding into this country. of course you're going to get crime. That's what happens.
You would get that if it. And I always make this point, Sally. You know, regardless of who the people were, if you put 500 23-year-old blokes into one place, then expect a degree of hassle.
And particularly if you allow them to roam outside unchecked, with very little supervision.
Yeah.
And they're from many of them from a very different culture from ours. So they, that of course things are going to happen. It's rather like with the BBC's sort of trans and with the panel that they had to try to filter out any potentially pejorative connotations from trans stories. So it meant that the trans agenda was being pushed because the BBC had in place a panel, people within the news programmes, who would vet each story to try to make sure that it did not show trans people and trans practices in a bad light.
Yeah, you could show a picture of an obviously bearded man, but don't at any point refer to this person as a man. Make sure you use the word woman, even though it's clearly not a woman.
Yes, and they refused to be at all critical of the idea of mutilating young teenagers, because that day they happened to feel that they might not be the woman or the young girl whose body they were born in, and that they were something else, but that they should be encouraged at all costs to continue to continue the fiction that they were somehow a boy just because they felt like a boy.
It might rather explain all of this kind of sort of editorial shenanigans going on there. Might explain why they've lost 750,000 listeners to their radios, while commercial stations such as ours have gained. The BBC are leaking like a sieve.
And I think it's terribly sad. I mean, there's so many things that the BBC does brilliantly, that, the arts, a lot of the regional news. I mean, the problem with the sort of perceived bias, as we've seen from the Trump case, and the fact that however it comes out, and obviously they're going to have to pay billions one way or another, either to their own lawyers, potentially to Trump if they end up settling even for a fraction of what Trump wants. And the problem is it rebounds on all the very good things that the BBC does, the nature, the documentaries, not the one on Trump, obviously.
I was going to say, the panorama thread is somewhat discredited these days, isn't it? I get it. Listen, Sally, great to have you on as ever. Thank you, Sally Jones. She is a former BBC presenter. She's been there at the coalface, knows what it looks like, knows how it works, and didn't like it very much. She got out, as did many of us. Thank you to her. Let's get some sports news at 5 to 9.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from The Sun.
Lloyd Canfield joins us, Chelsea FC reporter with The Sun. Morning to you, Lloyd. The Infantino story continues apace. I gave him to the end of the week to leg it and walk the plank. He's still there. He's kind of doubling down with a bit of an apology, but still staying in situ.
I can't believe he didn't listen to your threats, firstly.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, it's bizarre that he's still in the same post, if you ask me, but at the same time, when you look into the facts and the details, it's not really surprising given the amount of power that he's got as the president.
He has a lot of power, but he has less credibility than he had, a couple of months ago. I mean, his credibility sort of went slightly out the window when he overturned a red card, which was extraordinary. And now we're in this position where he thought the best thing to do for the world of football is to get into bed with a few city boys and make a bundle of cash. One would assume he would benefit out of that quite well too. And everybody, it seems, there's a few exceptions, but, certainly across Europe, the pivotal areas of international football are saying we have no faith in this man.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. Unfortunately, Europe, well, I don't know if it's unfortunate or not, but Europe doesn't represent the whole of the world. So he has so much backing from other parts of the world. He's got, for the next presidential election, which is March 2027, 211 nations would have a vote on whether he remains as the FIFA president. and he's already got the backing of over 100 nations from Africa and Asia. So the chances of him being overturned as president are very, very, very slim.
Unless something changes in the meantime. Listen, on that point, Lloyd, great to have you on. Thank you, Lloyd Canfield, Chelsea FC reporter over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. More from you on the way. A cracking final hour of Talk Breakfast on the way. Coming up next, the news headlines at 9.
The fact they're being released after 6 years is a slap in the face for the family. It's a slap in the face for you and all of Andrew's colleagues as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more than a slap in the face. Quite honestly, it's rubbing salt in wounds that have never healed from 7 years ago. And the thing with this news that we've got today is there's no deterrent that I see for individuals who commit these heinous crimes, and particularly who take an officer's life in the execution of their duty.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this, and let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Wait a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said to consummate fury from most of us that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
200 subs. Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
We have to protect them.
There's also protecting the border as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Ian Collins in for Jezza for this week. A couple of days, 1 day left of this week. And then next week as well. And then he is back. Loads to get through. We're talking about the university professor. We're talking about the former neo-Nazi. We're even talking about the Reliant Robin. You know what? When I came into this industry, when I was training all those years ago in a newsroom to be a journalist and a cub reporter being sent out on inane, stupid stories, I didn't think a quarter of a century later I'd be discussing the Reliant Robin. That was never on my CV of intention. But today marks the 25th anniversary of the end of the Reliant Robin. We just loosely referenced this at like 6:03 this morning. And the message board has blown up. Not on the big stories of the day, not on Kemi Badenoch's judgment, none of that. It's the Reliant Robin that has caught everybody's eye, it seems. Mark in Wigan says, years ago, a motorcycle was the poor man's mode of transport. He would then meet his partner and couldn't afford to go through a driving test or buy a decent car. So the answer was a three-wheeled car, cheap and legal with a motorcycle licence. The names we use for these, Cat Killer, because of the front wheel in the middle, increased the chances of getting the moggy. Did it? How do you increase the chances of that with one less? Does it confuse the cat? Is that why Reliant Robins were removed? Because of the disproportionate amount of cats that died at the wheel, singular, of the aforementioned? Maybe it was that. Back to more serious matters. On the former neo-Nazi, who was set to be a candidate for the Conservative Party, here's a voice note from Sadia. Morning.
Good morning, Ian. Many financial institutions in the UK do not accept you for a job when they've done a DBS on you and they find that you've got any financial repercussions against your name, such as a CCJ, let alone a criminal record. So this individual who thought he should or could stand as a counsellor with a criminal record is totally incorrect. It should never be acceptable.
Should never be acceptable. Christian, our producer, by the way, has just worked out... Sorry, I'm just not ignoring what Sadia said, which was completely profound and correct, but he's just worked out the physics of why it's more dangerous for a cat to run in front of a three-wheel car than a four-wheel car. I won't give you the full details now, but I think he's nailed it. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, who's, as far as I know, Isabel, never, ever been the owner of a Reliant Robin.
I haven't, but I really want to know whether is it true that it's more of a cat killer? Can you at least reveal this?
Well, apparently, so the cat runs out in the road and in dodging, thinks it's dodging one wheel. So have I got this right, Christian? But of course forgets that there's two wheels at the back. So it's entire the computing of its own sort of GPS.
Okay.
It reads the room incorrectly. By thinking, it's just one wheel I've got to avoid, but doesn't realise there's two more coming up behind it at 72 miles an hour.
I get it now. It's like I love these conundrums. It's like that whole thing of if it's pouring with rain and you've not got an umbrella, will you get less wet if you run for it, or will you? Because the rain then drives more into you, doesn't it? I mean, you'll have less time in the rain, but it kind of goes more into you.
So, right. So
I'm just broadening out the conversation here. From cats to the rain.
Yes, indeed. Yes. You just reminded me of when we ran out of a history class at school because we wanted to get out early to bump into a head teacher in the corridor. And he said, "You're out early." And we said, "No, we haven't been outside, sir." And he looked at us and he looked at our jumpers and said, and he used the phrase, you have been outside. I can tell by the minuteness of the globules on your on your jumpers that you've been in the rain. So, and we legged it as fast as we could, but we thought we got less wet, but maybe we didn't, as it turns out.
That's a question. Maybe Christian or someone else on production can get to the bottom of that one too.
Do you get less wet? Is that the correct English? It is correct, isn't it?
Not fewer wet.
Definitely not fewer wet. fewer minuteness of the globules, maybe. Fewer globules. If you run, I think you get less.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. If it's driving rain, I think you're better just walking really like that with your hands over your head. I don't know.
Yeah, or a newspaper. We've all done that from time to time. That turns out to be a fool's errand after about a mile. Yes, soggy newspaper with a Sun headline printed on your forehead to be going on with. Listen, let's talk firstly, if we could, Isabel, about this former neo-Nazi guy. It's divided a lot of people, understandably, because this man's past was particularly grim. I mean, this wasn't some bloke reposting a couple of sort of ultra right-wing ideas. He went for it in a big way, so much so he ended up at the Old Bailey and he went to jail for it. But of course, while in jail, he turned things around. He went on all the relevant courses. He accepted rehabilitation and got to a point where he thought, actually, this is, I've learnt from this. I can utilise this. I can use it. I can teach others not to go down this radical path. So in that respect, what's not to like about that? That's, the British system working exactly as we all argue every day should be working. Someone does something wrong, they learn from it, they start a new life. However, standing for public office, some people draw a line specifically on that, regardless of whether you're a politician or a civil servant. And being endorsed by the leader of a major party, which some have not unreasonably argued, it's a place she didn't need to go.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting debate, this one. And actually, I'm glad to see other parties getting the level of scrutiny that Reform has had over vetting of candidates and the past of candidates and so on. I mean, it's no secret that Reform's former MP, James McMurdoch, has had a wretched time and now currently sits as an independent over his criminal past. And in his case, it was 20 years ago. And, he served a short period of time for doing something awful. And that was that. And in the case of this former neo-Nazi, it was 10 years ago, wasn't it? And I sort of don't much like standing up for Kemi Badenoch, but I'm kind of a believer in people being able to contribute to public life a long time after they've learnt a lesson, after doing something terrible. Yeah. Now, the debate I think we're having is, where do you draw the line on that? I mean, would you accept a former murderer as a councillor? Would you? Quite. At what point is something just irrecoverable? And I think in the case of murder, obviously it's irrecoverable. You'd like to think you wouldn't be able to stand anyway because you'd be serving life, although we all know now life doesn't really mean life. But in this case, it is 10 years ago. It's a sort of unforced error by Kemi Badenoch. She didn't need this guy. It was obvious that there was going to be a controversy around it. But I'm probably a bit softer than some others on my side of politics when it comes to rehabilitation and the ability of people, particularly people who've seen what's like being inside jail, to actually contribute to public life.
I think I broadly agree with that, in that perhaps he works better as an advisor than as a politician. I mean, I think, we've a lot of people have mentioned this morning, if you go around certain sort of inner city areas where there's community centres and you've got a guy who's run a community centre for 20 years, getting kids off the street, getting them back on the straight and narrow, you discover the person running it also did 10 years in prison themselves, learnt from their mistakes. We applaud that. In fact, we give OBEs to people like this because of the brilliance in the way they turn their life around.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We absolutely do. Now, these people don't always make great politicians, that said. But then what does make a great politician? I'm not too keen on the lot we've got. And real life experience, on the wrong side of the tracks, and I'm not saying that was this person's background, I think is very valuable in politics. And I think it's very depressing when people who have had tough backgrounds and have made mistakes and done some bad things many years later want to go into public life and have a lot to contribute, have demonstrably turned their lives around. Everyone jumps up and down and goes, oh, look what they did in the past. You know, the past, when it's the distant past and you've put good, clear blue water between you and it, should remain that way. And I really do believe in that. But there are other ways of contributing other than being a councillor. But I personally think it's sort of okay to be a councillor if you've served time behind bars a long time ago and you are now a good and decent person trying actually to do your bit to give back.
Absolutely spot on. Another point about Kemi Badenoch while we're on. Now, she said we wouldn't do any pact with Reform, pre-election or post. Look, you and I and others have been around the block long enough. Of course she's going to say that. Every party would say that. No one has ever, I don't think in the history has ever said, oh, yes, in the event that we do really quite badly at the next election, we'll get into bed with the Liberal Democrats. Nobody says it out loud. But that wasn't the bit that I thought was interesting. That I would expect her to say that. She just called Reform woke. Now, you can put criticism at any political party, whether it's the Greens, Reform, Lib Dems or anyone, and that's democracy for you. I don't know if even the greatest critic of Nigel, Richard, Zia and others would call Reform a woke party. What do you think she meant by that?
Well, I think you had someone else on the show a little while ago, perhaps elaborating or trying to say what she might have meant by that. And I think she was talking about kind of Reform's policies on part nationalisation of certain utilities.
Could have been, but is that
what she meant?
Is that woke? I mean, you could say you disagree with it, but it's not. I think woke would be the wrong word, wouldn't it?
Completely. It's completely the wrong words. And I wonder whether she just sort of misspoke. Reform is obviously not woke. I mean, is she trying there to damage Reform in the eyes of those who are flirting with backing Restore? You know, that seems to be what she's suggesting, because undoubtedly Restore is trying to get votes, potential voters from those who think that Reform is a bit too mainstream, you know, is a little bit too grown up and serious and needs to be more head-banging and hard right. And I think maybe either she misspoke or secondly, she's trying to push support away from Reform to Restore, which she knows is unlikely to be such an electoral threat to her.
Let's move to this story. I think this is just, this has so many facets and threads to it, this Cambridge professor, Jason Arday. We've played this a couple of times already this morning, but it is worth playing again. It was a clip, it's a clip from one of the representatives of the Good Law Project. For those who don't know who the Good Law Project are, they're I was about to say left-leaning. No, they're a hard left legal pressure group, if you want to call it that. I'm sure they would resist all of the above, but I don't think even they couldn't try to sue me on that point. Run by the kimono-wearing fox killer Jolyon Morn. He's the fella that heads it up. This was one of their people speaking. I don't know, I can't name check her, I don't know her name, talking about Professor Arday and the investigation that some journalists were correctly doing into him and all that went with it. So this was her speaking at the end of July, and it comes under the category of that didn't age well. Let's have a listen.
And to the surprise of literally no one, from the start, newspapers like The Telegraph and The Times have been calling him a diversity poster boy and just overall annoying him. But now they're taking it a step further and they're trying to smear him with accusations of plagiarism, basically saying his work isn't his own and trying to discredit him. And it's really interesting because it doesn't matter that academic journals, universities, everybody that has looked into these claims has found no evidence of plagiarism whatsoever. The newspapers do not care. And we have to talk about it. A baseless smear campaign against a distinguished black academic isn't just a personal attack. It's an attempt to shut down a black person who has a platform.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot to tuck into there, Isabel. It's a classic case, isn't it? Just before we pursue, when the left in this case tried to suggest this is all about a black guy. She's raising the issue of race. No one else is raising the issue of race. She's raising that and weaponizing it to try and discredit any investigation. And it turns out that whoever she is needs to get in the bin and give her head a wobble, frankly, because everything she said there turns out to be complete nonsense.
How embarrassing and how utterly discrediting of her to leap to those conclusions. I mean, it's quite possible that commentators or reporters did call this guy a poster boy for diversity policies because he was. It now turns out that he absolutely was. That was quite a reasonable thing to say. It's not an unreasonable comment to make given how very open Oxford and Cambridge have been about the extent to which they prioritise individuals from those backgrounds. Now, we can argue about whether that's right or wrong, but Oxbridge has a pretty long recent history of being very open about its efforts to get more people from different backgrounds and how it will accept much lower credentials from those individuals. And you know, we can disagree or agree about whether that is or isn't right, but it's just a fact. And this individual from a very difficult background, I think no one's saying he's made up everything about his tough start in life, was, I guess, a poster boy for that. And what hadn't happened is the same level of scrutiny about all the claims he was making that might be applied to other candidates. And as one of your commentators was saying earlier, it's kind of a shame, really, because he didn't need to exaggerate all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he was pretty good anyway.
Nobody's disputing he's not a clever guy, and he's done all of his usual exams. That's fantastic, and he may well have still got the post in Cambridge, but it was all the stuff that went with it that clearly seduced the boffins over there at Cambridge when they realised this guy was relatively young in that sphere of academia. He was a young black guy. He was also a bit quirky, a bit cool. He'd done quite a lot of stuff. Single-handedly raised 5.5 million quid for charity. He didn't, not single-handedly. Published a book. He hadn't. Got over a major brain operation just 14 days before he took his exams. Not true. All of these things. They didn't need any of that, but it was such a powerful drug to those on the panel that they thought, let's get this guy on board.
Well, here's the irony. You know, if those on the panel were selecting for intelligence and brightness and the ability to think what's likely, they should have deselected themselves from their jobs because they didn't apply any of their supposed intelligence to the likelihood of this guy's claims being true. You know, how smart are these people? You know, how many people can run 100 miles a day and all the other ridiculous, preposterous claims the professor made? How come the supposed brightest and best elite of Cambridge University didn't see through any of that?
It's very strange. It's really rather strange. But, you know, the idea that he's now gone, he resigned. We did have a caller earlier from a professor at another university who said it's actually quite hard to resign instantaneously.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah. And I think he's probably right. This sounds like they came to an agreement.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. Yeah, you can't generally, like, it's like being a teacher. I mean, you don't just get to quit mid-term. I suppose it's summer now.
Half free on a Friday.
Yeah, I suppose it's summer now and it's sort of a semi-convenient time to lose somebody. But yeah, what an extraordinary story this has been. And I'm not sure it's entirely over yet, are you? I don't think this character is somebody, you know, said he's going to go away and heal, which is, you know, very nice parlance, typical of that woke university. But I'm sure we'll be hearing from him again in some shape or form.
I think we will. Can't wait either. Maybe he'll be on here with us. Who knows? Isabel, thank you. Great to have you with us. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks international editor on the programme. I love this one from Steve because it feeds in. I think everybody, to varying degrees, have met people who some just exaggerate a little bit of their lives, others completely invent. And I've worked with, there's two people particularly whose level of invention was off the scale. And they always say, if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big one. And Steve in Haywards Heath has sent in this. It says, Ian, regarding the professor who's been found out, he is a fantasist. They exist. I had a colleague when I started work in the 70s who apparently owned a string of polo ponies, had the chance to play for the Harlequins, but because of his career, owned properties in Argentina and Spain. He was a 25-year-old office clerk. When I saw him at a reunion recently, he told everybody about his trilogy about our ex-employer that was being published by HarperCollins that month. Still no sign. Fittingly, he always answered the phone by bellowing his surname. That's rather annoying. Collins! Bit bizarre when people do stuff like that. When he got engaged, his fiancée apparently made him change his surname by deed poll. So colourful, but probably not a shred of truth, says Steve. They're quite seductive, these characters. They are. There's a little bit of you that sort of almost wants to break a bit of bread with them and have a beer, just to, you know, seeing is believing. And there's maybe something in our lizard brain that wants to think that some of it is true, that maybe there's got to be a kernel of truth. Sure, nobody would just make up the fact that they are, you know, best friends with the Duke of Westminster, and you go to the chippy once a week with him and nobody knows about it. You know, whatever it happens to be, you own a fleet of cars, or in this case, polo. I mean, it's just, I think you sort of, it's entertaining and sort of bizarre. It's like watching some kind of Netflix show, but in real life when these people speak. So there is something sort of attractive about that. And then there's others who just believe it, which was bizarre. They really just believe it. There's no question. Oh, have you heard about Jim? Jim, what happened? You know, he's a multi-millionaire. Well, Jim, who lives on the council estate. Yeah, he's, well, 27 mil. He lives in the tower block round it. Yeah, it's just a front. A front? What's he live in a tower block for? Well, he owns all of it. Oh, he owns the whole tower block. Yeah. The whole estate, actually. Told me. Really? It's this kind of nonsense, and you think, that's just so bizarre that somebody would go there. We'll have more of that, I'm sure. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 9:25. We pause momentarily and return in 3.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing for my...
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. Homer Common Sense coming up on 9:30. Joe in Norfolk says, great show. I find it ironic that it's only the lefties that have to mention race or sexual orientation in an argument. Why can they not argue based on facts? The professor that lied would still be fake even if he was white. The facts trump everything. Indeed, and there's lots of journalistically facets to that story. But Joe is absolutely bang on. It was only the lefty lawyer or person from the Good Law Project in that video we played that mentions race. I mean, the idea that a load of journalists sat down and went, yeah, it's a great story. Really good story about an academic over there at Cambridge. Apparently he's been a little bit creative on his CV. And you know what's even better than that? He's black. No one said that ever. I mean, probably even back in the day, nobody said that. But you know what? That's the line the left took on this. So they decided the way to discredit the journalist and anyone who questioned it was that their only motivation could be based on the fact that it was a black guy, not a white guy. I mean, that's a story regardless of gender, sexual orientation, colour, religion. It doesn't matter. It's only given an ounce of prominence in the fact that Cambridge University was so keen to hire a young black guy because the male, stale and pale tag that has followed Oxbridge around for years was about to be fully crushed by the appointment of this young, cool, marathon-running, death-defying, fundraising superhuman called Jason. 0344 499 1000. On the point of the neo-Nazis, another story about people's pasts, although this guy doesn't dismiss or deny his past. Here's a voice note from Sarah.
Good morning, Ian. It's Sarah from Croydon. With regards to the Conservative councillor candidate and has he redeemed himself, it's the hypocrisy that irritates me because it's a Conservative candidate, so we can forgive him, he's moved on, he's proved himself to be a better person, etc. But when James McMurdoch, it was released that he was convicted of assault of his ex-girlfriend, that's a different matter, isn't it? So they're both violence against women or threats against women, but this chap, oh, it's okay, he can be forgiven, anti-Semitism. No, we can move on from that. He's improved himself, he's proved himself, etc. But James McMurdoch is a different story. Is that because he's reform?
That's a very good point, and Isabel Oakeshott made that point too. Thank you, Sarah, for that. I think that's kind of bang on. And Luciana Berger, who was the Labour MP, who was one of the victims, and I think we should use the word victim on this because she was particularly targeted by the former neo-Nazi. She was 6 months pregnant at the time. She had to go into the Old Bailey to give evidence over this. And it may not be physical violence, but that's not really the point. It's an attack, it's an assault, and there is violence within that, even if it came through words and threats and other things that were said. So it's hard to disagree with the point that Sarah just made. The other story we've been looking at here this morning is the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Conduct, who, after years, have decided that the Met officer who shot dead Chris Kaba will not face misconduct proceedings. Now, this is a victory for common sense and it's justice. It's a victory for policing, and we don't get those headlines as often as we should. They are out there, by the way. They're just not talked about as often as they should be. So this officer can now, after years, get back to a semblance of normality, as if he ever will, after going through all of that. Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector, is with us. It is a victory, Mike, but it comes with a cost for this officer because this was prolonged. He'd been through the legal case, not guilty. And then your own institution, that's meant to really winkle out the bad guys, decides to spend nearly half a decade investigating you.
It's truly shocking, isn't it, Ian? And the first thing I would say is that we ask ordinary people, police officers, to do extraordinary things, to carry a firearm, to shoot people, to keep us all safe. You know, so these people, they don't feel valued at all because they've been let down by the system. In the case of the sergeant here, it's utterly outrageous. One, he was at the trial. Before the trial, the judge named him. There was no need to do that. And so there's now a £10,000 bounty on his head. This judge, I looked into him, of course, his mother used to cut out clippings from The Guardian, so you can read into that what you want. And then we have the fact he's found not guilty. And then we go to this IOPC, and it takes 2 years. Well, I was actually shown the video of the shooting when it first happened by a TV company and asked for my opinion. And it was readily apparent what had happened, that he had shot at the man and the car had jumped forward and that had killed Cabba. So how does it take, if it took me 5 minutes, how did it take the IOPC another 2 years? Because one, you got the officer, you know, firstly, he doesn't know if he's going to be locked in prison, in solitary confinement for the rest of his life. And then he doesn't know if he's going to lose his job for another 2 years. It's completely outrageous.
And of course, it feeds back into that well-worn now. It's not even a theory, it's a reality, that if you sit there in the IOPC, you know, that officer had half a second, if that, to make a split-second decision. There was a maniac using a car clearly as a weapon. It could have easily gone the other way when the officer himself lost his life as a result of what was happening there. But, of course, over there at the IOPC, when everyone's got their nice little shiny laptop at their desk and they're watching this on loop for months on end, trying to find any little gap. Oh, look, there was a moment there where the officer's foot went forward before the car moved. So that would suggest that the officer was intending to already... You know, all of this retrospective guff that we hear, Mike, where people with the... It's not even the benefit of hindsight, it's the abuse of hindsight, frankly, to come to a very different conclusion, potentially.
Absolutely, and I think we should take those individuals to a sort of police range where targets flash out, and is it a woman with a baby or is it a man with a gun? And let them see how fast you have to make these decisions. But I'm afraid that these institutions like the IOPC, like the judge, they have a very left-leaning view, and you've been discussing the professor before, and I think this insidious belief that white man guilty, black man innocent. We had that photograph. You're showing realistic photographs of Cabba here, a violent gangster. Too often we get that smiling face, oh, he's going to be a dad. Well, he actually had a restraining order. He wasn't allowed to see his girlfriend. He was a wicked gangster who was going to be on trial for shooting somebody. Yeah. So you're right to show the real picture of an evil man, and the good sergeant, he did his duty and did what he had to do.
Mr Rowley, head of the Met, system for holding police to account is broken, he says. What do you think he means by this, Mike?
Well, I think there's it's the time, really. Any discipline matters, and I suffered some of this. Most officers will suffer some of this. What should take, you know, a day, a week, takes 6 months, 2 years, 4 years. Why does it take so long? And the process is often the punishment, because this officer has been found not guilty by the court. He's been found not guilty by the IOPC. And yet he's had 4 years of punishment. So, as I say, the process is the punishment often, and that's not right.
Yeah. Another story today, we hear that grooming gang members may be freed early from prison. I thought that was a no-no on the new Andy Burnham list of who should not come out of jail before their time.
Well, it's another thing. If they say the big talk, they say they're going to do this, and then they do another thing. Yep. And I'm really thinking, again, the left, they've never really liked prisons. They've never really liked punishment. They think that criminals are victims of society, etc., etc. And this is a good excuse that they can find to let them out, because you would think if there was a crisis in prison, well, employ me, because what we could do is all the empty spaces in a prison, the prison exercise yard, fill them with porta cabins or tents, empty out most of the women's prisons because they're non-violent crimes. Put in the sex offenders and police killers there. All these get an army camp, put some barbed wire around it. These are simple things. If you had the will to do it, but they don't have the will to do it, their solution is to let these evil people out.
And just a final point, Mike, on what happened yesterday in Covent Garden down in London. It was a I mean, something that could, we often say this, something that could have been a whole lot worse. It was bad enough where a woman with a blade was sort of rampaging in Covent Garden. 4 people were rushed to hospital. As it turns out, we understand their injuries, 2 were released, injuries not life-threatening or altering. But thank goodness, I think there's potential. I know it's being investigated. We can't say too much. Potentially a mental health issue. I mean, it does to most, even the untrained eye, look like that, if that's the correct way to put it. But certainly there's always a hero around, and one local barber apparently jumped out and attempted to alleviate and try and stop what was happening.
Well, that's great news, isn't it? We get these good news stories, don't we, of bravery by civilians and jumping out. And well done to the barber. I mean, I know that area like the back of my hand, all those streets, and it's a crowded area, so it would have caused a lot of mayhem there. But well done to the barber. It's good to see people doing a good news story rather than bad all the time.
Absolutely right. Mike, thank you, as ever. Good to see you again. Mike Neville, former, is a retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Thank you to him. Just before we pause, a couple of fantasist stories. We were talking about the professor and his sort of slightly imaginative CV in all sorts of areas. And it's just provoked... We could have done this at the beginning of the show and probably done a whole show on the fantasist you knew or worked with. And there's always one who tell not just a little bit of a lie, like pretending that their new car costs more than it did, or that they're going on a bigger holiday to prove something, or not those kind, proper big old lies. Mike says, my old school pal used to tell us he was a professional motorbike racer in the late 80s and early 90s, although none of us ever saw him race or even ride a bike. These days on Facebook, he posts photos of himself standing by motorbikes or random photos of someone riding a bike, but you can't see who it is because of the helmet. His posts say, miss my days racing in British GP. A complete fantasist. We still laugh at his insistence of this fantasy life. I mean, specifically when it's in one area like that. That's me over there. Well, you've got a helmet on. It could be anybody. No, it's definitely me. There's no evidence of this. I love that. Thank you, Mike, for that. And one in here from Diane in Oxford, who says, I once worked with a bloke in local government whose stories got more unbelievable by the week. Apparently, he was mates with Jerry Springer and used to pop over to Chicago for weekends. His daughter was a doctor there, and his best mate worked in intelligence at the Pentagon. One day we said, how's your daughter? He casually replied, oh, she died. It was delivered with such boredom, it felt like he'd grown tired of this particular storyline. Another time he claimed he caught hepatitis from a Chinese restaurant, but couldn't report it because the triads warned him not to contact the Environmental Health Department. I love that. Every workplace has one. It does. And these are, I've worked with a couple. Like, I can't really say too much about some of these because it would identify some people. But it was just big, fat, juicy lies. Because they're not just... It's not a lie of a moment. Oh, I've been there. So we went such and such at the week. Yeah, I've been there. That's just a silly lie. But concocting entire narratives that you spend your weekends in Chicago with Jerry Springer is it's just bonkers. It's mental. But there are people that do that. Yeah, I did work with a guy once who said he was in a band, and quite a well-known band, well, reasonably well-known in that niche genre. There was no truth in this at all. But he ran with it. And it was just a really... Why would you say that? It's very easy to work that out. Very easy to check it out as well. And then when Rumble, once in a while, people do challenge somebody on their lies. I saw this happen recently in a different place, different setting, not work, where somebody was sort of challenged, and they kind of quite, I don't even know if the word skillfully, but quite casually sort of talked their way out of the lie, almost into compounding the lie. So they didn't deny, they didn't look flustered, is the point. They didn't go bright red and go, oh, God, I've been rumbled. Because the lie is so big in the first place that you think nobody would make that up. Nobody would say, my mate, is Jerry Springer, and I fly to Chicago at the weekends to spend time with him, and my other mate, who's a secret intelligence in the Pentagon. And my daughter is a doctor who sadly died, but I forgot to mention, you know, all of that stuff. Maybe it's just part of the beautiful complexity, the spectrum that is the human condition, which throws up all manner of tangents. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm just discovering as well, people I work with are also fantasists. Now, Christian, our producer, I've known Christian for years because we used to work at the other place together as well. It turns out he's on permanent work experience. He's never been employed. Never been employed once. Neha, who's our vision mixer over there today, Neha's from India, and she's just told me that she's actually an illegal immigrant who came over the channel on a dinghy. They were her words, by the way, not mine. So I'm working with people I don't actually know. And Mark, I've also known for God knows how many years. I don't know what to make of Mark. I know he's got various strings to his bow, but there could be all sorts of things ready to manifest over time. And Tommy, who's our assistant today, who's on the phones, there's many strings to Tommy's bow. And it's very hard to find out, you know. Well, now I'm having to think about this. I'm wondering whether he's, you know, he does dance. He's a ballroom dancer as well as doing this. Is that, have I got the wrong genre? Oh, sorry. You just said to me in my ear, Irish dancing, second and third in the world. That sounds like a fantasy. That sounds like BS, doesn't it? Second and third in the world. No, I went to Argentina. I won the awards. What, they held the Irish Dancing Championship in Argentina? Seriously? In Montreal? But seriously, in Montreal? Why would they not do that in, like, Dublin, maybe? Just saying. 0344 499 1000. Let's speak to the political commentator, broadcaster, historian, fellow at the New Culture Forum, and good friend of the station, Rafe Hadel-Mancu. Rafe, good morning to you. We do meet fantasists, don't we, in our lives, and people who tell not just a little lie about what country they might have visited, but, you know, people who tell spectacular, entire narratives of their life, which informed us of this because of the professor at Cambridge, who may well be, you know, a qualified, very clever man, but he's not half the man we thought he was.
No, I mean, the first job I ever had as a teenager, my boss was a certified pathological liar who had told me that he'd never, this was in Canada when I lived in Canada, and he told me that he'd never been to the UK, always wanted to go to London. A month later, I heard him tell a group of people that he had gone to a garden party at Buckingham Palace, where he had later on had a chat with Prince Philip, who invited him to stay at the palace next time he was in the UK.
Fantastic. Yes, those people live among us. Maybe in a curious way. Maybe it makes the human gene pool just a little more interesting, that perhaps there's something in our lizard brain that keeps us in check if we know that these slightly curious characters who live just moderately outside the spectrum of normality exist. Maybe there's a use for them.
Well, maybe in some spheres of life to bring some comic relief to an otherwise dreary office environment.
True.
But not when they are essentially hoodwinking the brightest and the best, allegedly, in our society.
100%.
Leading academics, leading political figures, you know, the Zach Polanskis and the Labour MPs who signed the letter supporting Jason Arde.
Yeah.
All of these characters, you know, Krishna Guru Murthy from Channel 4, James O'Brien, LBC, without checking any of the claims about him, they circled the wagons around this man because he was their golden child.
Yeah.
He was somebody who was too important to their political, progressive, ideological cause to let him fail. I mean, he was the identity politics bingo card in human form, right? They ticked all the boxes: race, poverty, neurodivergent, illiterate, troubled, unorthodox childhood. There was so much invested in him that they chose to disbelieve what they saw before their eyes. And I think, you know, his resignation is not the end of all of this. It's actually the beginning of what should be a national scandal. How was it that such a person was able to hoodwink these people when every other person listening to this on Talk, any normal person could easily see that the emperor has no clothes? I think this is hugely damaging, not just for Cambridge University, but DEI programs around Britain, in America, Canada. Everyone should be now looking about this, because the question is, how many other Jason Ardes are out there? He was caught because he was so bold and blatant in his claims, but there could be thousands, you know, of other people who've been employed in things that they aren't qualified for, where they have no skill, but because they tick those diversity boxes. We could have lawyers, pilots, engineers, obviously lots of academics, particularly in these Mickey Mouse courses like critical race theory. This is a major scandal for DEI.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And as many people have said already this morning, Rafe, I mean, what's sort of sad about this really is that he didn't need to go there. No one's disputing that he's a guy with a certain brain and, you know, he's done his exams and qualifications. So he could so easily have continued down an academic path without all the fluff and invention around him. But for some reason decided that, I don't know whether they thought it made him a better person, a rounded person, whether he was a fantasist, whether he was desperate. So there's that side of it, which just makes it a crying shame. But there's also, as you rightly say, the idea that the panel at Cambridge, I assume there was some kind of panel, was so, I mean, they must have thought all their Christmases had come at once when this guy walked in the door and thought, man alive, this is you know, look at this guy, he's a bit quirky, he's cool, he raises money, he's been through neurological difficulties, he's had operations, he's published books, is there no end to this guy's talent? And of course, so much of it was a load of old guff, as we now know, which discredits the entire process. It discredits the hiring of people based on merit. The damage is immeasurable. And just a quick point on those left-wing thinkers that were ready to sign petitions. You can bet your bottom dollar, Rafe, they won't be apologising today. They'll be doubling down in some way.
Yeah, but I think you're being too nice to this person. There is no evidence that he was a bright academic at all. He's claimed to publish books that weren't there. He seems incapable of having any clear grasp as to how one does academic writing. The allegations of plagiarism. I mean, you know, he was being judged to a lower academic standard. You had Zach Polanski saying remarkably that this was racist because black people are being held to a high standard. On the contrary, James O'Brien, Zach Polanski, all of these academics are being undoubtedly racist because they have been judging this man by a lower standard. They're willing to forgive him for committing acts which they would not allow a white academic to do. Yeah. There is no way that John Moore University in Liverpool would have cleared his PhD thesis from the allegation of plagiarism had it been a white person, because simply there are too many examples, 118 examples in his PhD thesis. This is the reality. This is a person who also, I would say, is deeply nefarious character. Remember, this was a guy who hired lawyers and called the police to try to silence a journalist from one of the most reputable publications, yes. not the Daily Star or the Mail, but the Times Higher Education publication, yes. the most politically correct organization. They just asked him standard questions about his research, yep. and the police tried to silence him because Ade asked them to. This is a chap also who claimed the most outrageous sorts of racial harassment. He said a man said he would kill him if he didn't resign. He said that he was sent a dead pig's head in the post. But when they went to the butcher, who he claimed the thing came from, and when they went to the police, there was no evidence yes. of any of this.
Yeah, so this gets into not just silly, irrelevant tittle-tattle. This gets, that's kind of slightly grim, sort of advanced stage of something perhaps even darker. Listen, Rafe, great to get your call on this. Always good to have you on. Rafe Hale-Mancu, political commentator, fellow at the New Culture Forum, with us here on Talk. Jason in Sevenoaks says, on the story of the Cambridge professor who embellished the truth, I used to drink in a pub in Ightham, near where we are, or near where I live, I mean, where I used to talk to an airline pilot for British Airways. He had the epaulettes and everything, or so I thought. Turns out he was a gardener half a mile up the road. You can never tell. Jason, I love it. There's so much of this. This one from Steve. I had an uncle who used to like to spin a yarn or two. The best was that he ate camel feet with the Sultan of Brunei. He had only ever gone to Spain. He made me chuckle, though, and I believed it. John in Leicester, a bloke in the pub told us that when he was growing up during the war, he was with his mother at Foxton Locks near Market Harborough when they saw a German U-boat surface. Because obviously you could see it from there. Sarah says, morning here. My boyfriend is a musician and singer, and we were once in a pub just west of Hyde Park. You know, the one that's covered in Christmas trees in the winter? I do know the one. We were standing in the bar and got chatting to a guy who told my partner that he looked like a rock star and that his cousin was Paul Weller. He said he had a recording studio in Notting Hill. After talking for a long time, he said he wanted to help my man to be a successful rock star. He said he would fly him over, put him up in a hotel and help him get a recording contract. He said he was very successful in the music business. My other half was so excited, and it turned out to be a complete fabrication of lies. Do you know, that's really it's quite sad when that happens, though, isn't it? That's almost another thank you, Sarah, for that. And I'm actually deeply sorry to hear that. When somebody takes it to that sort of level, I mean, it's all very well somebody lying about their own existence, what they own, what their qualifications are, what they do, you know, who their best friend is, all that stuff. But when you start sort of making promises to people, and I did have a little bit of that in my kind of early career in this, but they weren't looking back, they weren't pivotal, but they were there. You know, they were like, you know, you think you're working with someone and they're telling you this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and don't worry, you know, you're going to have your own show as well in a couple of weeks' time. Really? Yeah. How is that going to happen? And this fella told me because he's going to be the programme director. He was a presenter, and I said, you're going to be the programme director? Really? Yeah, I'm a programme director. You're getting your own show in 3 weeks. Wow, that's a bit urgent. I was only working in Iceland last weekend. How am I going to do that? But yeah, it turned out not to be true. But that wasn't quite as troubling as the message from Sarah. Thank you for that. More on the way. Julia Hartley-Brewer pops in next here on Talk.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
The UK on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.